All right. Welcome to another episode of the Metaverse Nomads podcast, where we talk about all things metaverse related, blockchain gaming, NFTs, and all things associated around the metaverse as a whole. I'm Jesse, also known as Whitticus, and I'm here with some of the usual suspects. Let's go around a little bit. We've got Ray up in the top corner there. Ray, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I got my dark chocolate, 85%, with a nice glass of water. I'm ready for the show.
Cacao. Nice.
Cacao.
How about you, Banjo? How's it going, man?
I am doing well. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. And it's time for some libations.
Nice.
How
about you, Fancy Ad? How's it going?
Looking forward to having our guests here this week. It's going to be a great episode.
It is going to be a great episode. So with that, we do have a special guest this week. We've got two folks joining us from the Metaverse Mining Alliance, also known as MMA. We've got Casper and we've got Dark Swoop. Now, it's exciting to have them on. This is kind of an interesting setup to what's led up to this at this point, because this is a group that we have been speaking with for quite some time now. It's going back quite a ways, and I think before they were on anyone's radar, really, they were doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes without any hype, and I think they were doing a lot of things right and a lot of things that we as a guild with Rome can learn from. And for that reason, we have been going down that path of exploring not only what an alliance looks like, but a partnership as well. And details will be forthcoming more about that in the future, but it should stand on its own to say that if you've heard any of our shows in the past, that's something that we take quite serious, which is why we haven't had any announcements to that effect in the past prior to this. So with that, Dark Swoop and Casper, welcome to the show.
Hey there, great to be here. First off, I want to start and say, we're actually all on the team big fans of the show, so really looking forward to working together in the future, and excited to chat across a number of topics tonight.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really nice to be able to join you guys. We've had some fantastic discussions offline before, and I think it's really great that we've got the opportunity to discuss that now with you guys here and everyone in the comments and in the community in the future. It's a really great opportunity. Thank you very much.
So one of the things I think that makes this show special, and the way that we wanted to approach it, is that so many of you that are listening to this, whether you're listening to it live or whether you're going to whether you're listening to a replay, is that we, week to week, we do a lot of theory crafting. We talk about a lot of the different games we're involved in. For the most part, that covers a lot of Star Atlas. In the past, we've talked a bit about Mirandus and some of the other projects with Gala Games. We've talked about Axie Infinity, about Illuvium, DeFi Kingdoms. We've kind of covered some of the projects that are closest to us. There's a lot going on as the metaverse unfolds. But one of the things that's quite interesting is that most of the people that are participating in the play to earn side of blockchain games and metaverse gaming are somewhat crypto savvy. So in the past, a lot of us collectively have been looking at different crypto projects, but now that games have opened up, it's for those of us that have been passionate about games in the past, it's kind of a way to bring our passion into the mix as we can start earning. The thing that comes up that's interesting is that a lot of times it's speculation where we really don't understand much about the business of play to earn gaming. And the truth is, it's a new business to some degree, but I think there's a lot of value in learning from those that have expertise in other industries that are now looking at this industry to say, hey, how can we bring tried and true business principles to this space? And so that's one of the reasons that we have found a lot of value in the relationship that we have with MMA, is because these guys do come from a background of having experience in finance and are bringing that experience to the blockchain space. So what does that mean for you as someone listening to the show? Well, it may lend towards you having a better idea of things to think about as it relates to building a business in this space, whether that is just you as an individual that's participating in play to earn gaming, whether that's you as someone that's thinking about forming a guild, whether you have a guild or maybe even what to look for in a guild. So all the conversations that we want to have on the show with MMA surround the business of play to earn gaming. So I think with that, probably a good place to start with you guys, whichever wants to go first. Tell us a little bit about who you are and your background and how you found your way into this space.
Sure, I can take that one. Basically, our genesis really, like a lot of people involved in play to earn, is coming from Axie Infinity. We're a group of co-founders who have basically come from either Axie Infinity side or from the DeFi side of things. So we've kind of realized quite quickly that those are complementary experiences. And I think that what we've got within our team that we're going to talk about is really a truly integrated approach where people with different skills are all kind of supporting each other and really compounding the strengths. I think we'll go through these ideas a bit more, but everybody can learn from each other. And when it comes to decision making in a place like play to earn, where things move quickly and it's a dynamic environment, you want to be essentially inputting as many pieces of information into the decisions you're making.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes
So,
sense.
yeah, so we're a multi-game, multi-chain guild. That has challenges and has advantages. On the challenges side, it means tooling we might have built by our development team isn't one size fits all, where you've got different blockchains. But on the plus side, and we really see this as a strong plus, you have this kind of inbuilt diversification. You're not reliant on the performance or the sustainability of just one game. So I think that's where a lot of people have kind of realized that with what's happened in the Axie economy recently, is that if you are too wedded and too exposed to one game, you can kind of have everything riding on that. So I think what we'll see going forward is a lot more small and medium-sized guilds actually trying to spread themselves across a couple of games. And I think that leads into some discussion about how they do that, about which games are appropriate and what it means for them.
So that's exactly the type of conversations we're going to be having as the show goes on. But from a financials background, could you elaborate on MMA and its team on the financial end of the
Sure.
experience?
Yeah, like along the lines of where did you guys come from and why
Yeah.
this space? How'd you find yourselves here? What drew you here?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we were all part of a DeFi community that was looking at the opportunities in that space. And one of the co-founders was operating and had built from the ground up an Axie guild. So we started chatting and connecting actually around the launch of the Star Atlas posters.
Nice.
So it was there that the worlds collided a little bit, and we started throwing around these ideas of, actually these kind of financial engineering techniques and the things we're doing in DeFi are quite applicable in the P2E space. So it's from there that we kind of morphed into MMA, this guild operation, but really, as we like to call it, guild as a business, where it's not just purely play a game, earn some in-game currency, convert it into USD, pay your scholars at some point, which is probably V1.0 of a gaming guild. It's a lot more than that. It's about thinking about, okay, what are the asset flows after that? And how can you improve the margins for the business and the scholars, as well as taking out a lot of the kind of the inbuilt risks. So you may not realize it, but when you're involved in the P2E space, you end up becoming a bit of a passive speculator. Like I've mentioned before, and we really want to see, okay, how can we get rid of that? And it's something everybody in the space should be starting to think about a little bit.
Yeah, it's something that you guys will all be really quite familiar with. I started with Axie about 7 or 8 months ago, and it was a very one-dimensional process. You play, Every 2 weeks, you get your SLP, you check how much it is on CoinGecko or something, and that's how much you get. Your managers get a share, you get a share, that's that. And you're just sort of, like Casper said, spectating, and you're just going through the motions, really. And it's only through the time of us coming together and developing MMA, we realized it can be a lot more than that. There's a lot more like moving parts in play, and you can really actually maximize that opportunity. And we're going to obviously elaborate on that later. But it's interesting to reflect back to where P2E was, say, a year or 6 months ago. Because I don't know how you guys felt about it, but for me, it's a completely different landscape or the way that we're approaching it. It's really come a long way in a short period of time.
For sure, a lot of projects are adopting what the trailblazers of their time, like CyberKongs and Axie, with the two-token model, governance utility, and then just holding and earning yield off of an NFT profile picture. So a lot of the things that people coming into the space now are loving and reaping the rewards from are from. It started from one place and a couple of people with ideas and implementing them. So there's more of that where that came from.
Yeah, I think it kind of equates to the Wild West is kind of how the industry has been. And it occurs to me that you guys are bringing in some of the industrial revolution tools into the West to kind of set up shop. That's what inspires me most about what I see you guys doing.
Yeah, this is it, and there's a lot of commentators who say like the whole of crypto is just basically reliving financial history, kind of rediscovering all these different instruments and cycles and what works and what doesn't. So totally agree with that, and that's what we're trying to accelerate here. You know, there's a lot of analogous situations in play to earn to the real world, where solutions have already been derived for, for example, the farmer who is farming corn and doesn't want to be exposed to the price of corn every few months when his crop is done. He needs to know how many dollars he can take home to fix his tractor or to buy the next bunch of seeds. You can see how that's similar to somebody earning or yielding within a game and also having exposure to the value of what they're yielding. So there are institutions that solve these problems in the real life, right. And we can borrow what's already been built and coming back to the team, we've got team members from the commodities world, we've got team members from the investment banking world who have kind of seen these things in real life on a much larger scale and how to really leverage them to help businesses be more sustainable and to thrive.
Yeah, and
you bring up.
Go ahead, Ben.
Go ahead, Ray. Okay, Sorry, thank you. So, Casper, you bring up something that I'm familiar with, and is kind of something that I'm a hobbyist at least, and that's the idea of a futures market. When you're describing commodities, do you see a place for that in a Play 2E metaverse?
Yes, totally. And actually, it's probably one of the levers that the games can start to use themselves in terms of balancing the economy a bit, because when you have these tokens available and financial instruments available, you kind of allow people to do things they couldn't do before, right? If you've got more people playing the game sustainably, that's going to be better for your game. It's not a kind of one bullet solution, but it's definitely another lever that should be in there, along with all the other game economy related levers, crafting mechanisms, burn, mint, and all the other interesting stuff. That's definitely one which I think is there and which is going to grow. Right now, is the biggest games typically that have the most financial instruments available to help you with this kind of revenue optimization. But another important thing to remember, and this won't be applicable to the vast majority of smaller and medium-sized guilds, is in crypto there's always someone who wants to make a bet the other way. So just because there isn't a financial instrument there and a market there, it doesn't mean you can't find a counterparty to help you improve your operation.
Right. So before we jump into too many topics related to futures and things that have some of our audience eyes glaze over, interesting to
Sorry.
me, honestly, because it's like, for me, this is the part of gaming that I'm drawn to. In fact, I even play games that just are about resource management and about futures and all that sort of thing. But one of the things I think would be helpful to start with is we're talking about the concept as a whole, as a guild, as a business, because this is something that we have find ourselves exploring, and we have not been in a hurry to make choices and decisions. But now we're in a place, as we become more educated through assistance such as yours. Let's talk about that for a moment. Like, when we talk about play to earn, most people think in terms of the individual play to earn. Like, we do have some people on here that are scholars for people within our guild. So we have people on both sides. We have us as that run a guild. We've got those that are scholars, and then we've got people that have their own assets that are, in this case, would be like a scholar manager. But when you guys think in terms of a guild as a business, what does that mean to you? And I see you've got a slide here. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so I think this is just an expansion of what we were talking about, this kind of move from V1.0, which I kind of see as a guild owner effectively being an NFT renter to a small group of scholars, and then they're going to split the revenues. What you typically see happen is that scholar pool will grow a bit, and with that, the structure of the scholars might have some kind of hierarchy introduced, where you have managers. The level of strategic training will most likely increase, so you can make sure that everybody is playing the game in the right way. And the level of info sharing, if you like, for how that strategy might change over time, with the scholars, and even the scholars feeding back if something isn't working particularly well. That's kind of the version 2.0, if you like, which I think most guilds end up structuring themselves and moving towards. And then what I see as the next step, and there will be more steps in the future, I'm sure, is this fully integrated approach where you start to actually go from being this kind of simple operation to actually being more like a conglomerate, and more like an all-encompassing business. So here, you've got this idea of a treasury. So a treasury, typically, it just means the place where you manage your reserves. So if you've got a cash pile on, in your business, maybe you want to stick that and stake it somewhere, or maybe you want to just leave it in USD. It's typically a standalone entity, but what we've realized is you can do much more when you really integrate the treasury function and into the gaming side of the business and into the R&D. So, to talk about that a bit more, asset flows. Okay, so markets, if you're looking at secondary markets for, ships, for example, or a particular axis or a particular asset, secondary markets can be signaling something about the actual game itself.
Right.
And that's information that your scholars will want, your kind of research team would want, because it might impact what you're going to buy. It might impact, which teams your scholars are going to be set up with. But equally, you again, this is more for larger guilds as you grow. But if you're doing some kind of basic analysis or looking on chain at what's going on, you might have some other large guilds tagged. If you see they're buying a certain asset a lot more than other assets, that's also going to probably tell you something about the game. So this is where that information is going to be valuable for scholars, but that's also going to be valuable for your treasury team who are choosing what to buy. So all this stuff is all about, what we were talking about, with every bit of information from different places, from people with different skill sets, is going to enhance your ability to operate as a play to earn guild. And the players themselves, by the way, this goes the other way. That line of communication of what's going on in the game can be something treasury can benefit from. I don't know. Are certain assets being burned a lot in game that the gamers can actually see? is that being reflected in the secondary market pricing? So there's lots of kind of interesting things you can do to take it to the next level once you really have this kind of overall business where everyone's working together to achieve the same thing, and this
Right.
constant information flow.
Right.
Yeah, if I may, not to cut your train of thought there, but a lot of the guilds that have popped up since the inception of the scholarship rave and growth phase of Axie Infinity, they don't necessarily. I haven't personally, as I consume tens of thousands of hours of content, I don't see these types of conversations being had amongst the public, maybe within the personal discords themselves. But
Right.
wealth preservation and risk management, this is all on a higher level of the people who created those guilds usually consume themselves with. But it's just as important as we, as Rome, appeal to gamers. It's not something you should just forego as far as your financial literacy when it comes to this new era of NFT and crypto gaming. It's
Right.
definitely something that you would want to grow alongside with just your skills of knowledge about what game is a cool one, which one you only want to play, and So I just think this is just that other part of the pie, as Rome complements MMA and MMA complements Rome in the ways that would be portrayed, maybe not in one episode or one explanation of a guild as a business, but over time, as you spend more time in the space, if you're watching out there.
To answer Punjab's question here, who's a scholar? Your guildies. So I think it can be either. Now, the thing is that right now with most scholarship programs are built around things that don't require a lot of collaboration. It requires an individual to function kind of like as a freelancer who then performs their tasks. And so they could be a guildie, but right now, most gaming guilds, at least the way that I see it, are being built around the idea that eventually there will be reasons to collaborate in game. So as it stands now, a scholar could technically be a guildie, but right now, most of these structures are set up to where they're just kind of a freelance. Now, that also brings the interesting thing, because for me, for the past 20 years, I've been a business owner and I've been a freelancer, I've been a consultant. And so one of the things that you find, and most people can associate this if you know someone that's a real estate agent, is that when you're a freelancer, there's a lot of feast and famine. And when you can be a part of something, whether it's a guild, what I see happening with the structure that's being built here is that the structure is starting to shave off some of the peaks and valleys so that you have more stability of income that everyone can benefit from, both the scholars as well as anyone participating in the guild.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. That was a great explanation. And I equal it to your day trading NFT gaming projects because other than having that shave off, like you're saying, that's going to hedge the potential like major losses as these projects come in and out of popularity. Is that the hamster wheel you want to live on as a guild, that you just raise a lot of money on to then to rush to get that return back from the next new popular game, but then dies out after these noticeable things that we were talking about earlier, whereas the activity on the marketplace on OpenSea, for example, like Fancy Bird's upcoming game, I'm dropping names. We're not promoted by any of these games that we're talking about, but I personally, as an individual investor, took part in it, and I check out who's buying. And there's some the prominent guilds in the space that are buying up a bunch of Fancy Birds for the purposes of them being breedable, just like your Peg Axie, and then or your DeFi Hero Gen 0. I mean, your DeFi Kingdom Gen 0, and you can continually breed, and there's a cooldown period. So there's that potential print or go burr type of situation where if the tokenomics of the project are sound, it will be a sustainable project long term, and that's the whole point. As a guild, you want to be sustainable, and these are what we're talking about here, the types of methods and tools and things you can do to potentially stay around for the long haul and not die out like any other guild or project.
It's a mindset thing as well. It's kind of exactly as you're saying. At some point you have to step back and say, okay, am I here just to milk this thing until it falls over?
Right.
Or do I really believe that P2E can evolve itself into something sustainable, something bigger than it is now? Because if you're in the latter camp, you should be aiming to stay around until that happens. Because if you are around and it does become this kind of society-altering thing it could become, then all you're going to need to do is to be there, and you'll catch that rising tide. And how you can make sure you be there is by thinking, okay, what are my risks here? The first is diversifying across games, which we talked about a little bit. The other thing is thinking about, okay, the things I own, can I protect their value anyway? We talked about financial instruments. I guess the easy way to think about it is like, is there any way I can insure either my earnings or my assets, which I have? And this might not be direct insurance, but it might be something that is related, which is going to be protective for you in some worst case scenarios. So I think once people switch that mindset and kind of say, okay, look, this thing is here to stay. There isn't just one game, there's multiple game opportunities. You can start to adapt your business a little bit from this basic V 2.0 model we talked about into something bigger. And you can start small and do that yourself and just have an awareness of the risk factors to your business. And then as you grow over time, you can get more people involved and get some specialist knowledge. And, the other thing here is that like every day, different teams are building extra tools to help you do all this as well.
Right.
The tools available to aspiring guild owners, there's a bunch of cool stuff out there that other projects are working on. You just have to do a bit of research to see what's available to you to really start to take those steps from, one man band with a bunch of scholars and it's working quite well to, okay, how do I make this last 3 or 4 or 5 years into the future?
Right.
Yeah, Jesse, could you go back to the previous slide you were on? Do you have that available?
Yep, right here.
So when I look at this and I look past the integrated model, there's opportunities for each one of those parts of the triangle to be their own business. I see in the future there's a company that tracks the influencers, tracks the wallets, tracks the money that's going around, and they're providing R&D as a service to other businesses who might be, a guild is a business model, right? And same thing with training. There might be a company that builds and specializes in training or treasury management. And right now I think there is already a scholar business where you can go and rent scholars specifically, right?
And we see this in other industries.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say on the R&D side, you've kind of got, this exists already in the DeFi world. You've got things like Nansen available to you. Somebody at some point is going to build a Nansen for GameFi. That might be Nansen themselves. On the training side, I think that this is a separate conversation, but I think the way that play to earn evolves a little bit is increasing emphasis on skill and skilled gaming. So this is where there's going to be more leak over with actual kind of esports and pro gamers and things like that. And certainly in that world, this exists, right? There's all kind of like, training programs and things like that, and actual places where you can go and get strategic lessons for how to perform better in games at the top levels. So the model's already there. It just needs to be adapted for play to earn. And treasury, like you say, I think it is going to be difficult for smaller guilds to do the same kind of things we're doing without the professionals on the team that we have. But something we're looking at and promoting now is actually offering some of the things we're doing to small and medium-sized guilds in a beta form in the next 3 months, with the eventual idea being treasury services as a service. And this doesn't just mean kind of managing your stack. It means some of the things like, hedging your revenues, how you can ensure your asset base, what are the options to you as a small business, almost like a consultancy.
Can you give an example to that? Say, for example, that Rome is a guild. Let's say that we already have a functioning DAO as a business model for our guild. What are some examples of how you can hedge to kind of to mitigate risk? Like, what would that look like?
Yeah, so I guess there's 2 aspects. Like, one is your earnings stream, and the other one is your asset base. So your earning streams, without getting too technical, you basically know you are going to be long at some point in the future. Long meaning you're going to own some cryptocurrency. That means between now and that time in the future, when you're going to be owning this cryptocurrency, you're going to have exposure to price movements in it. And you can basically take that exposure out by taking the opposite position and selling what you're going to have in the future.
Well, let's use a real world example. Let's say that with Star Atlas, which our guild knows that we're very active in, how would you do that with an asset like Polis?
So the easier example is probably actually with Atlas, right? So if you're staking a ship and you know what the yield is at a given time, so you know in the next week or the next 2 weeks you're going to be receiving X amount of Atlas, what you can do then is you can go and you can sell the Atlas perp for the same equivalent amount. This is a simplified example. There's technicalities how you can optimize it even more, but by selling that, it means that if the price goes down, the Atlas you're going to receive in the next 2 weeks is going to go down in value. But because you are short, that short position is going to go up in value. So you effectively have locked in your USD earnings there for that period of time. Now, what that also means on the flip side, if you want to be a passive speculator, it also means if the price of Atlas goes up, your short position is going to lose you money. So you've added stability, but you've also taken away, the chance of upside or downside.
So are there services, or are you guys internally working on some sort of options model for these? Because that's really what you're describing, right?
Well, that example you can really do it with the the simple financial instruments which are available. But like I say, that there are counterparties happy to do more complex financial instruments on these in-game currencies, and there are conversations to be had. And like I say, I think the market for these will grow as people understand more the power as a lever financial instruments can have on game economies.
Right.
And I think it's interesting that a lot of people are being led to learn this via AAA games like Axie Infinity being the director of every guild management and to appeal to more game or specialized esports games, people who are going to be better at playing the game, right? So that already is a risk management hedge, right? Getting everyone who owns Scholars to understand, like, hey, just grinding the lowest of the arena with your MMR is not the best way to go about it. It's not the best way to think about it, and it won't last forever.
Exactly.
So
it's not sustainable.
Right. So across any game, you're going to have people who just are dumbfounded by, F these games. They're trying to take our money. We can't feed our children. Like, there's a whole spectrum of emotion wrapped up in, if you just look at the 50,000 foot view of things as MMA is doing, a lot like providing services specifically, but in a larger sense, if you're building a game, you can't technically do this for every guild management guild out there. A scholar management guild. Excuse me. So what you have to do is develop the game in a way that's going to forcefully direct everyone to pay attention to these things that we're talking about here, instead of specializing on them. And that's going to be up to the individual guild leaders themselves to learn if they don't know anything about, or to then partner with people who are specialized in this.
Exactly. It's that switch of mindset again from, living in the now.
Yep.
Living in the now to going, okay, what's going to happen in the next 6 months?
Right.
How are things going to look different? And what we've touched on is this evolution increasingly to skilled gamers,
right,
and the importance of strategy. For me, that's another reason I'm so happy about this this partnership with Rome is the synergies on that side, where you guys are really embedded in the strategy already in Star Atlas and beyond to other games. And I think people are probably sleeping on that a little bit, because by the time it becomes necessary to have a well thought out strategy and to have high skilled gamers on board, a lot of these medium-sized guilds are going to be scrambling a bit because they won't compete with the people who have built these teams of skilled gamers from solid gaming backgrounds and brought them into their guild and prepared them with the right tools to go and play in these games.
Exactly. I want to add to that, like, what's the culture of the leaders in any particular guild setting forth for their members? Is it one of those, like I said, that hamster wheel of the next popular project that you can just pimp out, even though they'll be here in the long run? The earning potential will decrease over time, or as more people come in. So it's just like, what do you want for the long term for your business? Because essentially that's what it is, whether you're going to acknowledge it or not, or operate it as one or not. And if you don't, it'll fail in the short term. But
well, it seems,
it
seems to me that we're going to run into a position where, the job market, if you will, for these skilled players, they're going to have a little bit more say in their pay rates and who they're going to go to. And I see a future potentially where a guild might bring in a very skilled player as a loss leader, just for name recognition and to bring that person in and attract other people. So the dynamic is going to change from just people who are craving to get that scholarship money to people who can actually say, well, what are you going to give me if I come and play for you?
That's happening already, right?
Yep.
Guilds have pro gamers and ex-pros kind of promoting their guilds when right now you don't need pro level game playing skills. And so those pros aren't playing any games. They're there to market. They might play an esports tournament, once a quarter,
right,
wearing the badge of the guild, but it's a marketing exercise, as you say.
Just to add to that, there's just a lot of that going on outside of gaming. The music industry, Snoop Dogg, right, Gala Games, or you look at the celebrities coming in, traditional financial institutions, right? Heineken's with their .eth, like for the Super Bowl, who knows what's going to show up there, right? You could guess in the comment section.
She's in the mix now.
Yeah,
she's all the monkeys.
So take your pick. It's happening across many different markets and industries. So if you're just a gamer, just something to pay attention to.
Absolutely. So, we talked a bit about here as a guild as a business. So I think we kind of have an idea, like, who are some of the different pieces of this puzzle here. Guild owners, in this case, it's like Metaverse Nomads. Scholars could be guildies, or it could be actual scholars. And we do have scholars within Rome. I've got some teams running for Axie as well as Pegixie. So in both cases, I've got scholars. So I understand the relationship there. Now, the next slide that you had here was talking about risk management. And I wanted to hear just a bit more about that, because for me, and I've seen so much of this, and this is kind of what inspired me to get involved in this space, because I've seen this strange thing happen thus far, where certain games will lead with hype more than utility. They'll lead with things that just give you enough to plant the seeds that you create the rest in your mind. And there's a lot of folks in the space that are gamers, and just that gamer mentality is that we love to fantasize about things. And so it ends up being an emotional play when you get involved in a project. And so we see a lot of people that end up chasing projects. So what are some of the things that an individual, be it someone that is just looking to be a part of play to earn games, or if someone's looking to build a guild or group around play to earn, what are some of the risk management things that should be considered, and what do you guys consider yourselves?
Yeah, so I think what's important here is to always have, if not formalized, a mental framework for which games you're going to play. What are going to be your red flags, and what are going to be your kind of key decision points? So it's very easy, if you've been playing games a long time, or you've been a crypto native for a long time, to say, hey, I've got an intuition, I've been around long enough, this seems like it'll be good. But when we're talking about a business and we're talking about longevity, you really need to make that a little bit more scientific. So I think anyone looking to become more multi-game, to diversify their exposure to other games, should definitely be thinking about what is their framework, and how do they think about that? To give some ideas, there's no right or wrong answer of what is the right framework. Different people will look for different things, but certainly the obvious stuff you would look for in any crypto project. Who are the team behind? Are there any red flags in terms of the tokenomics and how that looks? One thing we are looking at a lot now is, okay, outside of the tokenomics, what do we think that means for the actual game economy and sustainability of the game? How long or short will the game cycles be in a given game?
You mentioned team at the very beginning. So is a docs team a thing that you guys look for? I mean, how much weight does that carry that you actually know who the leadership is behind a project?
I think what you really want to look for is, can the team do this? If it's a bunch of anons, you don't really know if they can or not. I don't think having a fully doxed team is necessary, but I think you want to know that at least some of the kind of key leads in the team have a track record and can deliver what they're promising. I think that's
go ahead.
Yeah, it's just kind of one item across everything. So I really think when you're talking about a framework, you need to consider all the factors. But I guess what you're getting at is, okay, do you not touch totally anon games? That's going to vary from person to person,
right?
But it would definitely carry a big weight when we're having our internal conversation of, do we go into this? And by the way, you don't have to kind of be on or off for a game. You don't have to be all in or not play it at all. You can always stick a few $1,000s into a few assets, go and get a feel for the game, see what the mechanics are like, see what the fluctuations are like in the currency, and scale into it. There's that's part of our process. Having this multi-leg scaling where we do our in-game R&D, understand the strategy, understand what other players are doing, before we decide, okay, this looks viable, looks like it could be something that could work for us.
Are there any key indicators for you guys as it relates to identifying projects that have longevity or the stage that the project is currently in, so as you decide whether or not they're probably, some of the opportunity probably isn't there anymore? Like, what are some of the considerations there?
I mean, before Casper goes into just to elaborate before that, I'd say, what's your decision making process as an individual?
Right.
Because one of the things here is critical thinking skills, right? So,
but I think that's lacking. I think that's one of the things that's lacking in this space is critical thinking.
So I'm lucky enough to be able to lead into a slide in a minute to talk about the journey of education we've seen in the space from the start point to now. And I think that's a big underpinning theme of everything we've just discussed here, knowledge and education. There is no right and wrong answer, and you don't know definitively if something's going to be viable or not. You say that you think there's an absence, and I agree with you, by the way, of critical thinking skills in the space. But I think that's a transition of not treating these projects and thinking of them like you're a gamer and thinking of them like, what is this? This is a way.
It's the whole mindset thing again, isn't it? It's like, are you long term or are you just here, not really sure what's going on, but you're getting the dollars in?
Right.
Yeah,
I wanted to. Sorry. Let me just get my thought out before it runs out of my head. But to the point of the topic is that it really comes down to the individual. Just like we're saying, there's a multifaceted onion approach of what to look for in a project, which we all can name, a plethora of them. Mainly the Discord, the anonymity of the team, and all of those things. But if you're coming from the point of view of short-term mindset, then it doesn't mean anything to learn about anything more than if the project is being traded, and so then you could flip, because you're not going to be around and caring about the economy of any game if you're going to not be here for the long run. So you won't go the length to read the white paper to see if it's a sound project tokenomic wise or governance wise or however it's set up. So I just think you could really cut the conversation short in that sense of just simply asking, like, how long do you see yourself being in this space? Do you see yourself building anything? If you're not, then you're an investor. And just like with traditional companies, if you invested in the stock market at all, do you not care about how the company is ran, the balance sheet, what the money is going towards, because you are a shareholder? So are you a backseat type of investor, not caring so much, but just investing off of hype, right? So all of these things kind of intertwine into the crypto world. Like if you're going to have your bad habits from the investment world of traditional stocks, then you're not going to be that successful here either. It's just kind of it's not that different, but in the sense of the new culture and era of how businesses grow and what they become in this space, it's somewhat different.
I think from a risk perspective, there's some good stuff we could theory craft or dive into here. So, we've got a scholar base, and we've talked about them being a base that needs to be elevated in skill, right? And then we've got people who are leading guilds, but there's a group of people who are neither, right? There's a group of people who are passionate about the game, and who are there for the cohesion, the loyalty. And I'm wondering if one of the risks that is going to be out there, if you're attracting a scholar base that flows, where the best return is, or you've got skilled players who go where the best return is, when something goes south for a few moments, can you expect them to stick around? And I think I look internally to Rome, and we've got people who are just loyal to the nth degree, right? They're going to be Romans to the day they die, and they're not here to chase the best return. They're here because they like the camaraderie and the relationships that form. Now, when you get to a game or a guild that might be multi-game, how do you move that from game to game and keep it? I mean, or you have some people who are there for space sim, but maybe they're not into fantasy. So maybe you won't be able to get that whole guild to pivot, or you might spread yourself too thin. It seems like there's a lot of potential. And again, this isn't really just thinking out loud. It's not about pointing fingers in any direction. But there's so many things operationally that can challenge a successful business like this if you spread yourself too thin.
I mean, Casper's going to be able to give you a much more financially sound answer than me in a moment, right? But I agree completely. I'm going to be honest. But what you've said something at the start of that point that's really it resonates with me. For a game, I believe in not just P2E, but in any space, for it to be successful in the medium or long run, you need people who play the game because they enjoy the game, right? So that's got to come into your decision making if you're deciding I want to be in a project for the long run. We can compare some existing P2E games with Star Atlas. There are aspects about Star Atlas that will appeal, the fantasy space exploration, that aspect, the depth that's possibly going to be there. The world, the lore, the theory crafting that's going on, right? There is a very strong possibility that people are going to come and they're going to play the game and want to succeed and be part of a community, as you're seeing in your Discords and stuff now, because they want to. I don't believe, this is purely my opinion, that a game can succeed in the long term if everybody's here to just print money. There have to be people that play the game because they want to play the game, right? And like you say,
I think that's what's going to make this year so interesting. We're finally going to start to get some options, and the further we get into blockchain gaming, the more competition there's going to be for guilds and games altogether.
I have a quick question as it relates to that, because this is one I think we've talked about on the show, but I don't know if we've ever directly asked this question. How long do you guys think it's actually going to be before we see a real MMORPG, be it space with Star Atlas, be it fantasy world, where there's an actual in-game economy that is functional, where there's crafting, where there's those types of things that we anticipate, like what the true gamer wants out of these? How far do we think we're off still from the realization of that?
Well,
the end of this year, next year?
I think a project like Star, I again, it's purely anecdotal. I have no inside information or proof of this, but I think we all know there's a lot of eyes on projects like that, right? And from AAA mainstream developers, if they see that project start to succeed, they will be with us imminently. And if it doesn't, looking at the money that's still been invested, I believe it will be like a Pegaxi and Axie situation, where it will be slower, but they'll try and learn the lessons.
Mm-hmm. So my kind of take on this, and I think our take as a group is that it's going to take time for games to get more sustainable. So I'm not really looking to a point of time where games are fully sustainable. I'm just looking for games to become more sustainable, where we can, we can actually understand the game cycles a bit better, like real world economies. There's so many like good thought leaders now talking about, okay, how can we help to get games with stronger economies? What are the levers? Do these games need a kind of central bank like we have in the real world in emerging economies? Do we use financial instruments for that? Are we missing something in between the source and the sink with how we deliver those in-game economic activities, whether that's trading or crafting or whatever? Locked tokens, do they have something to play in this? Some games are experimenting with that, and I think it's really an evolution where people are seeing what works well, what doesn't work well. So I think we're going to increasingly come close to more and more sustainable games, which means that P2E businesses themselves become more and more sustainable. What I wouldn't do is pin and say, okay, the code's going to be cracked in 2 years. Because I don't know if that's the case. Another thing which will be important is how mainstream does this become, and those two things are interlinked: sustainability and I guess how solid is your user base.
Right.
You're going to come to the like you hinted at earlier, Ray, talking about Snoop and penetrating the mainstream through different mediums, right? I think that's a question I'd like to ask you guys. How long do you think we're good before we see a AAA developer actually get a presentation and throw a sustainable project out there or a proposal?
I think that there's a few of them jockeying.
Your mic is up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Right. So I think there's a few jockeying for position. I think Star Atlas is the furthest ahead. And the truth is, if all of the games were available immediately, if there was a fantasy MMO, that's actually more my jam. Actually, what Mirandus was building, that was the first draw to me. But the truth is, I can't even say with certainty that I'd be able to play that in my lifetime. I just don't think that they're anywhere close to where I can see that. I think that all of these games are going to go through phases where now it's like, okay, we have to seed the economy. And we're going to learn things from that. And then we're going to pivot and say, okay, well, what we thought we were going to do, now layer 2 of the economy of this virtual economy looks like this. And so we're in this early, such pioneering Wild West stage of all of this that it's too soon to even know what it looks like. And it's going to be trial and error by any company that chooses to jump out there in the forefront, like Star Atlas, which is why I'm super excited to see what they're going to do with Cream, where they're going to introduce crafting, because that's going to tell us so much about the impact on this virtual economy. The first stages is, are they creating something that's sustainable and that's eventually going to take on a life of its own? How long will they have to seed it before it becomes this entity of its own economic propulsion?
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen sooner. I don't think it's going to come from the direction that we're thinking. I mean, if you look at the large acquisitions that have happened recently with Microsoft and Sony, my personal belief is they're going to take a current IP that's already popular and turn it into some form of either hybrid play to earn format or try to go all the way. And I think it's the big game development companies that are going to bring out the first, maybe previous generation AAA content.
Yeah, I think that as well. I was going to bring up those major acquisitions that took place. And nevertheless, although that happened and it brings a lot of attention, I can't help but compare what Axie Infinity has done in the bear market since 2018 and how far along they are, although they don't share that enough. Because for DeFi Kingdoms, there's a whole bunch of items in the game that are tradable and tokens that you can swap for one another on the DEX. If Katana is the native DEX as DeFi Kingdoms is one itself, then to add more items that are tradable, it's not the breaker of worlds. It might be more simple than we think, but again, it's the bigger economy of how everything is going to be sustainable as you introduce all these different tokens that are in-game items that can be used to. So it's a more dynamic type of thing to handle, and these big companies might have the resources to do so, to hire out people, but that's all a lengthy process And then for even like Star Atlas, they express it all the time. We hired 50 people in the last month. Okay, now they have to get acclimated. They have to learn the ropes of what the goals of within the project and what they're trying to do, depending on the department they're in. And it's just like there's a lot of tedious like things that need to take place first before we see anything. So I don't even expect a bigger company like we see these acquisitions taking place, coming out with something that's operational. If anything, I'm more confident in a DeFi native team who've been here for many years that are generating, or have the same amount of money than one of these big projects, one of these traditional gaming companies own or have come out with something beforehand. But again, it's going to be that trial and error for a long time.
I love the thought process there, Banjo, and there's a really nice way to frame it. Is there's two ways to come at this. You can build a game on top of an economy, or you can build an economy on top of a game.
Yep.
And I guess we're going to know the answer, which is the fastest route to success here, because some people will try, like you say, existing IP. That takes years off, right? If you've already got a functioning game and you can then embed or enhance the economy inside it, you're shortcutting a lot of these guys who are building a game on top of an economy by quite a decent period of time, and you're going to have that first mover advantage, if you like.
Yeah,
there's a variable we haven't discussed. Sorry, Jesse. There's a variable we haven't discussed. Is there's companies building back end for this process, right? So you've got like Forte Games. They haven't even announced what they're doing. They've announced some partnerships, but their whole goal is to build the back end of blockchain gaming. So there's companies that aren't up front and center in this space. We're looking at the projects that we like Star Atlas and Mirandus, but there's businesses that are obscure that are doing this work already, and we don't know about them.
I think the difference between the stuff that's being built in the DeFi space versus the big giant acquisitions we're seeing in the corporate world is that the corporate world is never going to build it from the perspective of wanting to power the individual. And I think that's where the DeFi comes in. And because of that, I think they're going to keep hitting roadblocks. I mean, we're seeing like Meta kind of fall apart with what they're approaching, simply because it's going to be a hard pivot, and they don't have the trust of the people to build out what, at least the metaverse that we see. They might be an on-ramp for the traditional gamer because it's familiar and they can make that kind of a relationship. But when it gets down to the real virtual economy that sits underneath, I think that is something that's going to be built in the DeFi space, and it's going to be the economy first and gamify sitting on top, which occurs to me is how Star Atlas is going about it.
Yes, it totally is.
This is quite a good question by Watson. Yeah. Could a pivot to chains save Star Atlas? And I don't think it could really, because one of the main things about all these DeFi project games is that they are getting the crypto people who believe in it. And all these Star Citizen people, I'm not sure how many of them would accept like a change to a tokenized economy or NFTs being like how they would fund it from now on, because they are having trouble with how much runway they have left now on their current funding.
It'd be a hard sell.
The next comment in the chat there is, there's the belief that the Star Citizen community hates anything crypto related. And I think that goes all the way back to public sentiment. And if you think about how quickly the public can turn on a project, I mean, we just saw one this week that had a lot of fanfare behind it. And within a day, it was getting a lot of hate because people spent money and then they were asking them to spend more money. And we know that the gaming community can be one of the most toxic communities out there. We've probably all been part of a project or exposed to a project that had the best of intentions but didn't deliver, and then all of a sudden it's the worst game of the year. And I think PTE games can suffer from that as well.
We're a long way, really. I just to add to that, like, I'm sure all of us in our own spare time are still involved with like mainstream gaming communities away from like P2E and crypto. And it's really interesting for me whenever two of the communities I love the most and have been involved in is the eSport FIFA sports game and Call of Duty, right? Some of my like regular old people that play like semi-competitive Call of Duty or just play for fun, you mention this kind of stuff to them and they're a million miles away from accepting it.
Yeah.
A million miles, because it's really easy for us to sit here and discuss in a long form discussion for 2 hours as you guys do every week, because we're so entrenched in that now. The mainstream audience is still a long way. So if you take a community like Star Citizens and just present them with this thing that they're not that familiar with, probably very skeptical of, it would just it's probably just too far away. I think we could be 4 or 5 years away easily before we see mainstream gaming communities start to actually welcome and embrace crypto and PTB.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think can change that, and I think that this industry desperately needs, whether it fails or not, we need to see how it plays out, is to take something that the gaming industry is intimately familiar with, a World of Warcraft, let's take something like that off the shelf and figure out a way to implement a blockchain-based virtual economy, because it's already proven to be playable. It's already proven to be interesting. It already has a marketplace. It already has many years of people farming gold and selling it for real world value, selling those items on eBay and other places. So we know it has a long history that's accepted, but what would something like that look like if it's sat on chain? I think that the moment we see that, it could fail, but at least it needs to play out for us to understand whether it will work or not.
Yeah. If you look at a game that may have been, just lost to time, like EverQuest or something, right? Something that people played a lot way back when, but no one really talks about today. If somebody picks that up or picks up the source files for it and throws PTE into it, everything's there, right? And we know that the modding community is some of the best community for advancing games out there, usually graphically and from sound, but also from the back end stuff too. So all it would take is one good small group of developers to take an old IP that no one touches anymore and kind of give you a proof of concept.
Yeah. With this question here, I don't think that Star Atlas needs to buy Star Citizen. I think Star Citizen is running out of runway, and Star Atlas is just going to continue to scoop up their talent, which they're already doing. Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So with that, I want to jump back in because we want to be respectful of your guys' time there, MMA. And one of the things that I thought would be really cool to share with our audience is what you guys have done. You kind of started off doing a lot of stuff in the shadows. I mean, you weren't trying to be all flamboyant and get yourselves out there and do lots of marketing. Instead, you were doing some fundamental, proper company building behind the scenes. And then now you're starting to open that up. You guys are in the middle of doing some stuff yourself. Before we jumped into that, I did have this one slide that I wanted to talk just a bit about, or at least have you guys kind of share some thoughts as to how you see like the people in this space. And let's let that be a lead in to what you guys are doing and why you created what you're creating, and tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, for my part of the answer to that question, this is actually perfect to lead into it, right? So we'll focus on the scholars part right now, because that kind of is an easy answer for me to talk about what I've been doing along with the rest of the gaming operations of MMA. Is we've been slowly and gradually building up an organic growth of scholars in Axie. We didn't go down the conventional approach, it's fair to say, of putting on Twitter, there's a scholarship, apply, or open a Discord up or a competition. We actually built it up from 50 to about pretty much organically, word of mouth, trust. That was a big thing for us. In the Philippines, for example, a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, like that, right? Very organic. And a similar thing with our partners in Brazil with Carl. They've got a vastly different infrastructure to us. They had an application and vetting process where they were looking for good quality gamers who could prove that they were skilled at, say, turn-based games and communication. And that shows the contrast between our approach and theirs. And we took a very gradual approach initially of building up a network of trust. One thing we noticed is in the community of our Axie gamers, right? A lot of them know each other, or then if they've got to know each other, because person X knows person Y, invited so on and so forth. And you've built a real strong, close-knit community. That's taught us a lot when we think about know your people.
For perspective, are you guys able to share any numbers, just so people know to scale? You guys actually are significant players in the Axie space.
So we've administered about just over 1,000 accounts now.
Wow. Yeah.
All across the world, to Brazil, to the Philippines, Argentina, Germany, the United Kingdom, if you include people like myself, the US, all over the world, really. And we've got these small sub-communities in their own like regional areas. So we've got like a Filipino community that predominantly communicate together, a South American, so on and so forth. Right. And on the slide in front of us, we're talking about like community trust, training, mentorship. We've been really lucky to learn a lot of lessons that I think other people found hard during the recent economic turmoil of Axie, because we had such a strong, close-knit group of scholars in their individual area. They know each other. They want to support each other, encourage each other, coach each other. If one of them posts, I'm struggling with this team, I don't know how to deal with a Terminator, how do I do it? And then you get a series of, and it's just about networking, I guess, building that trust. And then the question is, other than economic reasons, why would I want to stay with this guild if I'm a scholar? Well, yeah, I could look and fish for an extra 5% from 65 to 70. But what am I losing? I'm losing a community of people who I know, I've got to know, that are sharing information with me, that are actively trying to encourage me to get better. We really like to try and reward scholars that do that. So we've effectively promoted quite a few coaches and stuff up through the system because they've taken the time in their days to coach and help other people. It's organic growth, kind of what you'd want to see in any kind of ideal community or company, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
How can we incentivize people? Yeah, you go on.
And it's really actually interesting to see how different guilds in the space are approaching this, and there's some really cool like differentiated aspects. Like you see some guilds offering education, general education to their scholars as kind of part of the community package. Other places it's about financial empowerment and helping them understand how to manage their finances. So I think this is where the concept of P2E can really go almost beyond a pure business, but actually into this wider social impact aspect. When not only have you got an operating business that's giving people work, is actually really changing lives, and that's actually the appeal for a decent subset of investors. So investors are primarily driven by returns. So it's important when you're talking about play to earn that you communicate with the right people in the right way. Pro gamers are going to be less interested than the investors are in what the financial opportunities are in terms of hedging and staking and long-term rewards, and more interested in just, okay, what games are we going to be playing? Who am I going to be playing with? How can I win? And also, how many dollars can I take from this? But it's going to be a lot more nuanced kind of hierarchy of needs, if you like. Right. So I think what we really wanted to say with this is when you're upscaling your business and trying to pitch to different groups of people what it is you're doing, is to always bear in mind the different set of eyes people are going to be looking at your business with. So if you're looking for capital from someone, they're going to want to hear a different perspective to if you're looking to get a ex-pro gamer on board to help you with strategy, or if you're looking to increase the size of your scholar network. And that was something which we identified early, and probably why we have been in stealth in terms of the gaming guild scholar community, is we very much in this early stage been focusing on that investor community, on pitching the business to them and really understanding the risks around it and how we can make this attractive from that perspective. It's the stage after capital raise where you almost pivot a little bit and say, okay, now we just need to do the job. What do we need to do it? We need the infrastructure, we need the tools, we need the team, we need the scholars, we need those gamers for the eventual evolution to skilled gaming. We need the partners, which are going to help us fill in the gaps we've got as a team, which are going to give us synergies, which are going to help us kind of grow quicker and more effectively with the ecosystem.
There's just one little thing there as well. We've got on the slide, feel good and part of the story. It's easy to forget when we talk about all the economics and the incredible numbers that float around in the space, that on a scholar and individual person by person basis, there's very few industries in the world, to my knowledge, where you can find somebody and help them actually economically so clearly.
Right.
about any exploitation,
Right.
and it's genuinely a mutually beneficial partnership. There are so few of them in the world, and I think it's easy to forget that we can succeed as a business while genuinely, wholeheartedly helping somebody out in a part of the world that needs it in a time that they need it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and for me, I have a limited experience between Axie and Peg Axie with having scholar teams. And there was a period of time where if a project happens to be in a lull, as it has been, I've had scholars, within Axie that have been struggling as the price of SLP has been down low. And then now, as I've kind of been exploring things in another project, and that's not to say that it will always be that way with Axie. Axie will probably pivot and make some changes that bring opportunity back. But what I see as interesting with what you guys are doing, because you're developing a landscape, you're developing kind of like a portfolio of projects, you're able to probably do some things to create opportunity that are lateral moves for maybe even some of your scholars, as I've done with some of my scholars from one project to another, while there's opportunity for them to earn within Peg Axie, perhaps over Axie. And then who knows, maybe there'll be an opportunity for them to come back and make an equal portion. But it's the things that I've seen that you guys are doing that I really appreciate is you're looking at each group of people that participate in the ecosystem that you're creating, be it the investor and the opportunity that they have, be it the scholar and stabilizing it. I've listened to some of your town halls and some of the things you guys talk about where you're trying to create an environment that creates stability, not just for what you as an organization are able to create for returns for yourself and for your investors, but also to stabilize the impact on the scholars that participate in what you're doing. So to me, that's pretty awesome. Are you guys able to share a bit more about what you guys have done? I know that you guys are in the middle of launching. You've already done some impressive things. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yes, sure. So we basically are in the run-in now to our IDO, our token sale. That's on the 22nd of February. There's a really limited amount of tokens going there. Reason being, we did a pre-sale for our early community. So we've effectively done the majority of our capital raise, and these are really tokens and an opportunity for people who want to get involved in the investment opportunity that is MMA as a differentiated play to earn guild. So I would say to anyone listening, come and jump in to the Discord, have a look at the website, do your research, ask a bunch of questions, and really understand what it is we're offering, and then there's the chance for you to get involved.
Can I ask? I mean, you only share stuff that you guys have already shared publicly, but how did it go? Did you guys what did you say? Where you guys stand now?
Yes, so it was really incredible. We were going through this pre-sale kind of in the depths of the crypto bear market. Things have obviously recovered a little bit now since then. This was kind of in the middle of January, and we managed to be super successful. The whitelist was oversubscribed, I think, by 130%, and we essentially sold out all the pre-sale very, very quickly. And that was really testament to actually, I think, being able to properly vocalize and talk about what the business is and why it isn't just an alt or an alt token here really that you're betting on. It's actually something that's got long-term legs, and you should be viewing it in that way as an investor. It's not something where you should be expecting any short-term pump, but you should really go through the materials that we put together, the kind of ideas we've been talking about today, risk management, being there for the long term, understanding the groups of people, and see it really as an opportunity to get involved in an interesting business in a very interesting landscape that's going to change and grow a lot going forward.
Yeah, and the other thing we found is, since we've done the pre-sale, during and after, there's an incredible amount, and I know some of them are listening, so I want to give them a bit of a shout out. In our community, some of the people that have organically come and started working with us are just phenomenal. And again, it's that kind of thing that as we enter a new age of business and Web3, and I'm sure you found it with your community building in your Discord in Rome, you find some phenomenally talented people out there, whether it be smaller, it's just incredible, right? We are really proud of the product that we're going to offer in our services. But again, on the other side of the coin, the community that we've started to build, they're amazing. And that's really one of the pillars that no amount of money in the world can help with.
Sure.
A dollar amount doesn't have, an amazing community. And that's something we're incredibly thankful for because they're amazing.
So what were some of the considerations? Because as you kind of alluded to there a moment ago, Casper, how you guys were able to have a successful pre-sale launch while navigating a market that just kind of took a flip there for a moment. And at the same time, we have seen other projects miss their mark by a lot. And my heart goes out to them because they're pioneers just like the rest of us. And all you can do is put your best foot forward and estimate how you think things will go. And if you miss that mark, it's really hard to recover from. What were some of the considerations that you guys kind of went through to be able to do as well as you've done through this turbulent time?
Yeah, I think like the messaging is very important. I've been working closely with our marketing team actually in the run up to IDO, and something they've been repeating is it is a lot more important to establish what your message is and what makes you unique rather than just to kind of execute and stick content out there and figuring out. A lot of projects, what they tend to do is they'll start kind of executing, putting things out there, and they'll figure out their message along the way. But by the time you've got that far, it is kind of a bit too late. So it's very important to spend a lot of time on understanding, what you are and what it is you want to achieve in the long term. And not only that, who are you trying to sell the business to? Who do you want looking at your project, and what's going to make it interesting for them? It comes back to the slide a little bit, and it kind of explains how we were able to, raise a very good chunk of capital, but yet not be on the radar of barely any other guilds.
Yeah.
Because we kind of realized that, okay, if we go out there and market ourselves as a guild, we're probably going to get a lot of great scholars. We're probably going to get some gamers wanting to join us in our strategy, but we aren't necessarily going to get the eyeballs of investors who don't really know anything about gaming, but find a way to earn an interesting concept, want some exposure to the metaverse. So, that was a bet by us in a way, but it definitely paid off. And looking back, I think it was the right approach to take.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And where are you at in the process now, and what's upcoming?
So just kind of to reiterate, then we've done our pre-sale. We've got the actual main IDO on the 22nd of February. Once we've done that, we hope to raise a few more dollars. Probably it's going to be quite popular, so it's going to be another large chunk of capital to add to our war chest. And then going forward beyond that, it's all about making this sustainable business, deploying those assets. I think what we typically have as a framework in our head is, each dollar capital we get in, about 50% of it will go into in-game assets. The rest will be split between actually building tools, infrastructure, increasing the headcount of the team, keeping a bunch on reserves for the right opportunity. Like you say, there's a bunch of games where big ticket sales are coming, so things like land, which you almost have to save up for. It's not like you can suddenly sell a bunch of axes and buy a plot of land in Star Atlas. You're probably going to come unstuck if that's your approach. So yeah, it's really exciting. We've gone through this capital raise. We've got this early community who are really behind us and helping us with every section of the business, really, from building our white paper to the marketing to the gameplay aspect. Everybody wants to be involved, and we want to do right by everybody. So as soon as we've concluded the capital raise and we've kind of got this early community of backers, it's then all on us to really keep doing what we're doing and deliver on our vision.
Nice. Yeah, I think you're doing a great job at that as well. I would like to ask, but outside of the giveaway that you have running, which you can elaborate on, are there any leaks that MMA can share with us for their own community, but also for maybe any Romans and people out there watching? Any leaks? Because we have to ask if there's leaks.
We like alpha.
Yes. So I guess there's a couple of things. One thing that's been nice about this marketing up until now is we've really focused on branding and keeping it professional. So the upside of that is that you get the right people being interested in your business. So we've had a few kind of important people from the P2E industry reaching out to learn more about what we're doing and what our vision is and how they can get involved or help, which for me makes the process all worthwhile because it means what we're doing is getting through to the right eyes. On the flip side, it's very hard building a community, doing things that way. It's a grind. You guys know. In the end, you can be delivering the best content and value add ever, but if you're not getting the right eyes on it, it's going to limit you in growth. So this is why we're kind of combining that with our big giveaway, which is launching next week. So we're going to be giving away a large amount of MMA tokens. This won't be like your typical 10 sol giveaway or win an NFT. There's going to be a lot more at stake, but it's also not just going to be a kind of rote retweet and like. We've actually put together a video with the help of some consultants to really explain in a succinct, exciting way what the play to earn opportunity is, and how to get involved. The idea really there is we want people to somehow get hooked on, wow, play to earn, that sounds like something that's interesting. I've never heard of that. Like, let me learn more. How do I get involved in this? Because that's the majority of people. Hopefully eventually it won't be, but that is the majority of people out there. So yeah, the idea is if we can get some extra eyes, not just on MMA really, but some extra eyes on P2E as a concept and an opportunity, that's really going to help drive interest in MMA, but also broader interest in what P2E can offer to someone who isn't a gamer.
Right. So is that to say that, I mean, a part of your target market, I would imagine it would be, are the folks that you're actually partially having to educate on, hey, there's this space, there's this opportunity. You've heard the buzzword metaverse. You may not have heard about, P2E gaming in the blockchain space. And so you're kind of taking those folks that maybe might be investment savvy, maybe a touch crypto, but introducing them to kind of this market segment.
I actually feel that's a responsibility of anybody in the space. If you're sensible and you want this to be part of what you're doing in a long-term way, you've got a responsibility to try and break this beyond this very small niche of crypto and DeFi and play to earn participants, and it's an interesting thing, right? This is something that if you bring it up at the dinner table with someone, you don't put people to sleep. That's my experience anyway. You get people going, what? No, how can that be? Right. So once you can actually put the right message out there and kind of let people see what the opportunity is, even if there's problems to solve, right? There's no sustainable economies yet. There's things which haven't been properly solved, but there's this what if question, right? Like this play to earn can change the world.
Yeah.
That is just amazing.
I got a question. Speaking of like keeping the people's attention and waking them up here, I have a question that I'm sure will stop a few people from typing and focusing on other screens. And the question is this: what right now are the hottest things in your portfolio, and what's on your radar? What are you guys looking at? And is there a criteria for how you find new things?
So the criteria comes back to this framework, and there's a number of things that go into that. There's a lot of games we're playing now, which are very much a kind of gamified DeFi. And what we do is we allocate funds to that, and we buy assets in that game, and we scale in if we feel like there is sustainability, and we don't scale in if we feel like there is not. Rather than pointing to specific games and giving too much alpha away, I would say definitely there's a lot of opportunity on some of these chains which people wouldn't necessarily look at. I think if you're looking at expanding your kind of gaming stable, I would say don't be scared to go away from Ethereum or Ethereum forks. Have a look at Avax, have a look at Polygon, have a look at some of these other chains. There's interesting opportunities there, and you really limit yourself if you feel like you don't want to play away from home.
Right.
I have a question, and without saying who, there's obviously competition in this space. And what do you think competition or more competition is going to bring to the space of P2E as a business? I think, at some point, the front runners right now kind of have the opportunity to do it and say whatever they want to do. And there's a lot of hopium behind some of the projects that are out there. So what do you think competition is going to bring to this space?
Well, I mean, we'll start with just the purely gaming side. We're in the infancy of this. We have got a lot of players. If we're going to migrate people from the mainstream gaming audience into P2E, there's a lot of room. We can fit these people in. And if we're going to fit them all in, we are ultimately going to need more players in the game. Mm-hmm. But secondly, you talk about the front runners and stuff. As you say, the pressure is on them. And what I want to see is growth and development and aspiration. I would say this as a salesman's pitch, we are bringing something fundamentally we believe is different to the table. I'm happy about it. I think it gives us an excellent market opportunity. I'd like to see more of that. More evolution, more education, and more progress, because we need to see it.
On my side, I kind of echo that. Like, obviously, you're going to see, competition breeds innovation. That's just natural. You can already see now quite a few guilds are having their own USP, having their own slightly different way of tackling the problem on top of the core, NFT rental system. People are building these different interesting aspects that come into it. Over time, what typically happens, like any normal new industry, you're probably going to have a consolidation. The interesting medium-sized guilds are probably going to end up partnered up or kind of embedded in the larger YGGs of the world, because that's how industry works generally. But from our perspective, what we're really thinking is like, look, this is great. We have got this USP now. We can deliver a lot of value to the sector. We can stand out as a guild. In 6 months, that's probably not going to be the case. In 6 months, other people are going to be taking note of what we're doing. They're going to be probably hiring people from commodities backgrounds, from banking backgrounds. So we're always about, okay, look, what have we got next? What's going to be our differentiating factor in 6 months? How do you stay ahead? So yeah, and the other big guilds out there will be thinking in the same way. Anyone who's playing long term will be aware that you need to build what they call in business. You need to build long term moats. You need to build something that makes you different, that people can't attack and just duplicate. That's going to give you longevity. So that's what we're always kind of acutely aware of, and that's why we're making these interesting partnerships with strategic teams like yourself, with market commentators, with different people from different aspects, to really see where we gain edges across all the different kind of sides of the P2E equation, because edges erode in life generally, in finance, anywhere you'll see that. So if you just sit on something you believe it is an edge and is going to give you infinite money forever, you're going to come unstuck. And in crypto more than anywhere else, where things move so fast, edges disappear quickly.
Yeah, these are
So
not.
we're
I'll let you
we're all
finish your
about
point
that.
before
We're
I-
all about okay, long term, but at the same time, we also realize that we need to be ready for what's going to happen in the next 6 months, what's going to happen in the next 12 months. Our business is probably going to look very different. There's probably going to be a focus on esports, gamers, the kind of things we've been talking about. Maybe even more focus on game economy as games deliver more transparency. Maybe some games start to lean more on this central bank idea. Things are going to look very different, and if you want to succeed, you're going to need to be agile.
I mean, I'd love more of a development in esports, but the kind of the point is what we're talking to you about today and what we've talked about historically, they're not just our innovations, they're our first innovations. We know full well that whatever we do, if it's successful, other people will do it as well. So we need to keep moving forward and keep coming up with new ideas. That's the trick to succeed here, not just sitting around. You got to make some moves.
Do you envision a day where traditional finance goes long into this space? I mean, right now you're getting investors out of that space, but once you start seeing traditional finance industry push into this space, well, in some ways it's probably a good thing. In some ways it'll probably be a bad thing. But how far out do you think we are from that?
I think in terms of other guilds taking the approach that we are, I think that will be a big thing in 6 to 12 months. That's different to your question, where finance is actually going into it rather than P2E pulling people from the TradFi world in. I've had some good conversations with VCs in the space, and one thing that resonates a lot is that traditional finance people, they don't grow on trees, and if they do get involved in crypto, they typically go to the DeFi side. Play to earn is a little bit nichey, and it's not obvious yet the edge and the value that someone from a trading desk at Goldman Sachs can actually bring to a gaming guild. And why is that? It's because up until now, from what we've seen, most people pitch it to the gaming world, to the other guilds. It's only when you start to go, okay, here's all the bits and pieces of how our business works. Here's all the bits and pieces of how it can be optimized as a business. When things start to click, and that's essentially how we've managed to convert a lot of our existing investor base. Really, is going beyond explaining how P2E works, but really into what is the business underneath and what is the opportunities as a business.
Yeah, it's an interesting landscape as a whole in crypto, where it seems like there are things that don't necessarily echo the traditional world of business. For example, in the traditional world of business, we're used to first mover advantage being a window of time where it extends out a lot further. But like you're saying now, people identifying things that you're doing right, they're going to like, hey, let's snap that up and put it in play immediately, and you start to see those things roll out like within the next 6 months. So it seems like the world in this space happens a whole lot faster, and you don't have as long a time as a first mover.
Yeah, like I think like there's not going to be many single game guilds out there in 6 months' time. Like everybody will catch on to this idea that you don't need to be tied to one game. There's a basic concept of diversification, where if you're playing 3 games instead of playing 1, you reduce your risk of ruin, your risk of going bust on one rug pull, and that will just become table stakes, right, for guilds. And at some point, having a treasury department, or at least paying someone to do your treasury services bit, will become table stakes. Having a pro team as part of your guild will eventually become table stakes. So how you stay ahead is really looking at the early signs for what is going to be the next thing, and how can you position yourself the best for it. Myself, like aside from looking into the marketing and getting ready for our capital raise, I've been spending hours a day really trying to go as deep as I can on game economy. There's just so much good stuff you can read about that, because game developers are working on it long before P2E. So there's a ton to learn, and again, it's kind of what Ray was saying. Is like you can't anymore just think of this as let's go and like stake and keep staking till the emissions go down, until I'm not printing as much money from a game, because that's going to disappear pretty soon. You need to be looking at, okay, what are people saying is important, and getting up to speed as much as you can on those.
Yeah, and even if a guild does want to focus on one game predominantly, it's only going to make sense in the future to diversify and stabilize what you're doing and what you're operating. You don't want, even if you're ultra passionate about it, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. It only makes sense to have a little bit somewhere else, just to have that backup plan or stabilize what you're doing.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ray.
No, I was just going to quick mention that I was there before YGG even had a Discord. So I'm one of the proud holders of a founder's coin of only 300. So, as awesome as it is to have one of those, you see the growth in the space as what Casper was mentioning, actually, of you're going to have more games. They set the trend, as, and Axie did with the 2-token model. And that's just commonplace now to be successful as a guild, even if you don't pay attention to economics or, the financial side of a guild. It makes sense to do that.
But then there's another piece that is challenging, and that becomes the part of the guild, the people that run the guild. Because there are players that show up to play the game, and they only want to focus on the one game. And the best that do it are only going to focus on the one game. And so you, as a guild owners and those that run guilds, need to kind of run buffer for them to feel like they're in a guild that is only focused on the game. Because if you start to diversify so much and all of your communication is spread across the board, then you're going to find yourself in situations like, and I will name drop in this instance, YGG, because they're like one of the biggest out there that people recognize. They seem to be all over the place, and I don't know how their model will do in an immersive MMO style game, because that takes people that are fully immersed. If you know the culture of games in the past like EverQuest and Camelot and World of Warcraft, those folks were not playing multiple games. They were immersed in that game as a culture. And so we need to create space for that as well.
I mean, the thing is, you're
Totally.
completely right. I'll say, from going from a mainstream background, if you're an esports player, you play your game. And as a guild, if we have a responsibility to look after these people, they're professionals. It's no different to any other business or any other walk of life. If we onboard a professional Axie player who trains Axie and practices Axie, and that's our responsibility to look after that employee effectively.
Right.
We've got to respect these people's professions and look after them.
I like the framing of the question. It's really, okay, as we move forward, there's a problem to be solved, isn't there? How do you unify what's essentially a stratified community where, two guys play completely different types of games, not even different games, different types of games with different skills. How are you as a guild going to make those guys feel like they're part of the same team? I think that's where what will come with the move to more skilled gaming being a prerequisite is the requirement for community tools which enable that somehow. How do we bridge this gap? How can we make people feel like they're getting equal treatment when they're having different games with different amounts of information yielding different amounts of dollars? So yeah, I think that will evolve over time. It's definitely something we've kind of got on the whiteboard of, as we go down that way, how do you keep that banner as one?
Well, it seems to me organizationally, you have two paths. You can either outsource it to guilds that are playing the game and are very passionate about the game, or you have to have some sort of structure within your organization that allows for maybe game managers that are the guild leaders for that game. And both probably have their pros and cons, and necessary solutions that come with that. But it seems like you can't just hope that the passion will follow you from game to game, right? You have to have people who are passionate in the games that they're playing.
I think that's generally it. If you're going to perform at the top level of a mainstream or even some games that we're going to see in this space, That is your focus. That is your passion. And if you choose, or unfortunately, if the circumstances come that you have to migrate to another game, you've got to treat it like a profession.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same. It's no different to somebody in the real world that has to migrate from one profession to another.
Mm-hmm.
When they've spent that amount of time dedicating themselves down that route, you've got to support them if that circumstance changes to migrate or retrain, if you will.
Right.
You know, if somebody moved from one job to another, you have to retrain and refocus. And that's something that I know we'll take very seriously. And I think, to be fair, a good amount of our competitors in P2E will adopt that mainstream approach of treating people like professionals and supporting them to act like one.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a question for you guys regarding, the tension between decentralization and centralization, right? There's always going to be a push and pull in one direction or the other. We're seeing some acquisitions in the game space that are centralizing in nature, right? So how long do you think we see a play by, whether it's traditional finance or maybe the gaming industry, who does an acquisition of a gaming guild as we're describing it right now?
I mean, in my opinion, that depends on how successful they are.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I'll elaborate. The thing is, there are already eyes on this space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said earlier your point about how quickly until AAA games penetrate the market. Well, it's really simple. You can either start from fresh, or you can go in with something that's sort of established.
Mm-hmm.
I know if I wanted to start up a gaming guild, what's easier? Purchase something if you've got the resources that's already set up, or start organically. And if you've got the economic resources to make that purchase, I imagine they'll do it if they're serious about going into that space and have found it to be a viable strategy. In terms of when, look at the growth of a YGG in terms of raw dollar numbers from 12 months ago to now.
Yeah, and we know within the crypto community, some would identify that as selling your soul, right? I mean, that's when you talk about it, obviously the people who stand to benefit from it would probably be open to that opportunity. Who wouldn't, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to take all opportunities and assess them, but there's going to be a portion of the community that's maybe frustrated by that. It's going to be interesting. I think this is the theory craft of guilds as a business, right? That we're talking about.
I mean, I see that far away personally. First we got to get to the stage where people are kind of moving from real world and using P2E as an on-ramp effectively. And we're not even there yet. And there's a lot of, I think there's going to be a turning point in the next year where you kind of have essentially a rebranding of crypto to Web 3.0, because crypto has a lot of negative connotations attached to it from the past 10 years. And as we go through that, and as we see more and more companies pivoting to this metaverse label and what that means, it probably increases in likelihood. But I don't know. It's hard for me to see Google buying Merit Circle or buying YGG or buying anyone else at this stage.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody, or at least I wasn't framing that near term.
No.
But I never think we would have.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Darcy.
No, I think that I agree with you. I don't see somebody purchasing the finished product necessarily, but something that's on the way after seeing the destinations that we've seen in the last year. If you look at from point A to B, if you could catch that as it's on the ascendancy, I believe there's a possibility in the next 2 or 3 years. You could see somebody, what if, for example, we continue to grow and then another guild joins the space and continues to grow? Eventually, prying eyes will see the opportunity and maybe think, that one's on the way up. Let's make a move. And
well, you look at some of the, you look at some of the market cap of some of these larger organizations right now, and they're appealing, right? They've obviously demonstrated the ability to generate and collect wealth, and I think people will be enticed by that. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
No, it's fine. It's a good point. I think that's kind of the overriding point, though. You're never far away in this space from a surprise.
True.
If we'd have had this conversation even just 8 months ago about how much money would be in the space, we'd have all probably said, maybe, possibly, we'll see. And here we are. You're never far away from a surprise.
For sure.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Go ahead, Ray.
No, I just wanted to make a point earlier to when it's just heartbreaking to when you're transitioning. If you started off just having one game with a set of scholars and everyone was dedicated and excited about that game, that sometimes there's branching off of those players from your guild unless they were making money as a scholar. But even if they weren't, to grow in that way, as a YGG set forth the example, having more games come on into your Discord that you guys invest in as whoever you are as a guild out there. It sometimes, if you're not prepping the community members with what you're trying to do, it's not going to end well. So you'll have a bunch of channels that appeal to different people, but where's the community? And that's a major cornerstone of any success, no matter how much money. And that's why I always talked about on the Star Atlas end, as we talk about it most here, and we're invested in. There's a lot of guilds out there who talk a big number, and then when it comes to actual gameplay for Star Atlas specifically, it might be a different story altogether. When that time comes, it might, and there's a whole bunch of time before that ever happens to build out some type of structure where there's a cohesive community that cares and doesn't just want money, but it's all a process.
Indeed. All right. So with that, I wanted to ask you guys, like, where do they find you? Where's the best place for them to stay up on top of the things that you guys are doing and what's next?
So I think definitely give us a follow on our Twitter, MMA Gaming _IO. Then I would say next thing is join the Discord. That's where all our community are. That's where you can keep most up to date. All the announcements come through the Discord before the social media. And the Discord is there on the Twitter. You can go and jump in. We've also got our new website up, which is www.mmagaming.io, which really is the messaging we were talking about at the start of the show, for how we see play to earn as the business opportunity for people.
Awesome. Well, very good. It's been great having you guys here on with us. And for those of you that have joined us late, as we already mentioned, that one of the reasons that we really wanted to bring MMA on here with us is because we have been talking with them for quite some time. We've been doing information sharing and kind of building a relationship that has now led to us looking to form a partnership. And of course, as time goes on, we'll be able to share a bit more about what that looks like. But also, we anticipate wanting to have you guys back on the show here from time to time to share your perspective, especially from the lens that you guys have, having already done what you've done in the financial space and now bringing that into play to earn. But just also how you see the industry as a whole. And with that, I don't know if you guys want to stick around, but you certainly are invited to. We'd like it if you could and wanted to, as we start talking about some of the other things that we catch up on within the industry as it relates to Star Atlas. There was a town hall and some things like that. And I know we have a few images and things like that. So you're welcome to stick around and weigh in as we do our theory crafting and just share our thoughts about things as they happen.
We will definitely stick around, but I just want to say, thanks for the opportunity. It's been a great chat. I've definitely actually taken a few notes here and learned some things my side, as I always do when we watch the show. We will definitely be back. The space is going to evolve. I'm sure there's going to be an ongoing list of different stuff to talk about as things change. So really looking forward to it. Thanks again.
And just from my own perspective, I think what excites me about this is a great example of what the future can be for different groups in this space, where we're seeing within Star Atlas, there's people that have these utopian alliances that really aren't tied to anything, but a lot of dreams, right? So this is really more like a business partnership than what we're seeing. We're not asking MMA to come to our rescue when the shit hits the fan in the metaverse, right? It's more, and they may do that, but it's more about how do we mutually support each other in the metaverse and outside the metaverse, which I think is the core of a true alliance.
Totally. Well said.
Yep.
All right. With that, Fancy, what do we have for news? Where do we want to start?
So there was another roadmap report this week, and quite a lot of information on there. A lot of it was gone through by Swagler in the interview, not in the town hall. that happened this week. I talked about Polish. The DAO is still hopefully February. That's a quote. And the next 6 ships are fully concept complete. I found that quite interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what those are. Plenty of new hires around Star Atlas. I think it was 13 within the last 12 days of January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the town hall as a whole was light on big bursts of information, and I think they filled it up with a bit more of wanting to be transparent and say, hey, look, we don't have a bunch of big nuggets to share with you here, but we are growing, and here's some of the things on the horizon. With those new ships, I guess there was supposed to be something like 51 or 59 this year. Like, what do we know? What was that number?
I think it was like 52 or something like that.
Minus the Titans, yeah.
And we've seen one. So we've seen one, which is the that rockin' space bike. Actually, I wasn't thinking of this one. So we've seen 2 then, I guess. We saw this one, which is great. I love this thing. But then we saw this thing, which is basically, a seat on an engine. which I love the theme, like, the whole biker theme that they've been going with. My question about this one, and we've seen it with the X4 as well, they're supposed to be space worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are the exact physics that allows a vessel like this to go outside of the atmosphere? Is that something we really see happening?
Well, they've been pretty clear that riders would need suits except for the Ooster, right? And beyond that, they are implying that there's some sort of bubble if you're going to hyperdrive or warp to one place to another. The technology is there for these small vehicles to do that. As it stands, humans, or at least mud, can't fly them in space without a spacesuit on.
Right. But
there is a third ship, though, Jesse. There's an outline. Yeah, here. Fancy, can you tell us about this, or do you have any more info on this?
So I'm not really sure what it is. It looks quite fightery or data runner-ish, perhaps. But yeah, it's quite hard to tell anything about this from just the silhouette. Like those little corridors between the head part could be like large enough for people, or it just could be like a bit of reinforcement. And the bit at the front of like the head, would that be big enough for like 5 people perhaps, or is that just one person, or too many questions really?
Yeah, it strikes me just by design, it strikes me as something that's like a one person, but who knows?
Yeah, me too. I think it's Ogrica, honestly.
Yeah,
my guess probably Ogrica or Busan, maybe medium or large.
So moving on from some of the other items in that town hall, and I'd love to get you guys to weigh in on this, Dark Swoop and Casper, is like, what were you guys' take on what was shared about the DAO? I mean, does it feel like are they on track? Are they struggling? How's it forming? What are you guys' thoughts?
Well, I'm glad. I'm relieved to see that there's clearly a lot of thought going into it. It's a soft way of saying, yes, it might be delayed. But I would much rather, in the grand scheme of things, them really mull it out. The explanation was short but succinct. If they need time and there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer, and they're going to have to take an approach that involves multiple, I think there's probably going to be 2 or 3 entities that end up consulting on the final decision and execution of this. I'd much rather see that and have it done slightly slower than rushed out.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys feel about that.
It's something they're going to have to build themselves from. There's nothing they can just buy and utilize. It's a very complex type of thing. And we do want it done properly.
And I think we're going to see this continually, right? I mean, there's always going to be some new loop that's going to create a problem for the team because they are at the leading edge of innovation here as far as putting this type of game into the space. I think what's on my mind about the DAO is less about the timing and more about the return. And I think there's going to be potentially some surprises of people who are expecting the same types of returns that we're getting from ships, from Polis. And we know that it sounds like they're positioning Polis as more of a governance than an earning mechanism.
And that feels like a bit of a step back. And that's not to say that was the intention, but I think that speaking generally for what I think the community received over time was, if we look back at the early stages of interviews, it was suggested that one of the things that seemed to be a core part of what was developing with Star Atlas was that a year was roughly approximate time that it was suggested that a person should be able to see. In other words, it was Wagner said himself that he thought that a year was a reasonable time for return on investment. I think that is generous for sure. I think it lives somewhere in the middle, unlike the things we're seeing like with some of the games now where people are looking for a 35 to 40 day return. But with Atlas and with the ships, it was hovering somewhere around 6%, 8%, and up to 10% at some point. Now, with what we've heard and it's been hinted at, it seems like it'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 19, 20%. And I think that has created a little bit of a concern and turn off for people that are saying, hey, my investment's going to sit there for a while. I really don't know what it's going to do, and that's what I'm going to earn.
I want to throw some food for thought out.
Please do. Yeah.
And this is the skeptical perspective. So what happens when you start printing a lot of rewards for a coin? You get downward pressure on the price. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Polis is the coin that the Star Atlas team are all allocated and hold.
That's accurate.
So
and private investors.
I would probably be looking at that and thinking, is that coming into the decision here? Is there some element where the Polis wants to be a little bit protected if it can? When are people vesting? Is that in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months already? Having kind of looked at these projects and the tokenomics in detail, I'd be looking at that and thinking, okay, is this coming into the decision? What does it potentially mean for dynamics in terms of development and rollout? What does it potentially mean for price action on the respective in-game and governance coin? So that's probably a very different angle to what you were thinking, but it's probably one that bears some consideration.
It's a very good point, though. And ultimately, if some of the decision-making is based on the rollout of the game, if this is thinking in the medium and long term, I believe getting that information out there that this is why these actions have been taken, the sooner the better. We don't want this kind of thing leaving to the last minute.
What's your thought on my angle, guys? I would like to hear.
So if I'm clear on your angle, you're suggesting that because they feel like the governance and that token is twofold. One, a way for them to have to retain control of the direction of the project, but also for them to be compensated for the success of the project. Correct. And so they're holding that closer to the chest as a result of those two factors. Is that what I heard?
Not as a result of those two factors, but I think it's a consideration. I think it must come into the decision making. Printing, unless I've read this wrong, you guys have probably looked at the tokenomics more recently than me. But printing Atlas doesn't affect the team directly if they don't hold that as their kind of allocated compensation token for the project. Printing Polis does. So I think it's just an extra dimension to the decision making, which may or may not be in play.
Yeah, that's a good question. My question that I've always had with both Atlas and Polis is the amount of that is going towards not so much a team. I always thought that it's appropriate. The team should have this particular allocation, but I'm more concerned on both of those for the allocation towards private, meaning that there's an influential party that is going to have a lot of influence and we don't know who they are or what their intentions or motives are. So.
But I think it makes sense that they're using Polis as part of their compensation package. And I would imagine it's probably has a vesting period tied to it as well. So I totally understand and appreciate the perspective, Casper. I think they have a vested interest in protecting that just for the sake of their development team and the happiness of their employees.
Yeah, to answer your question, I was going to pull this up here. This is straight out of the economic paper. That in here we can see that the The light gray down there on the bottom is private token sales, and then we've got team, which is in the gray, and then you have the actual rewards pool in the orange. And so all the way up through the next couple of years, it's substantially in the direction of both the team, which I think is appropriate. But I'm curious again, what will be the impact of the private sale, and will that be something that we actually have access to? Will guilds have access to that? Will there be at some point a means for groups to be able to approach Star Atlas and say, "Hey, we have an interest in that portion of Polis"? You guys think that's a possibility, or is it just something that's completely up to them and they will say, "Hey, we'll have our private sale and we'll do those dealings"?
I think logically, for the sake of rapport with the community, you'd have to involve them. It would be very unwise. I think pretty simply, it'd be very unwise to not offer people who are vested in actually promoting the project the opportunity.
Yeah.
Your point, Banjo, about are there people already influencing the decision making, however, that's the kind of thing I think if that is a possibility, that should be out on the table as soon as possible.
Yeah,
I mean, is
something
this sorry, is this not talking about, private investors? Like, are those tokens not already sold, and it could just be, I don't know, an allocation for their Series A investors, for example, that's represented by that, rather than a kind of future private token sale?
So what you're saying, this could be the vesting schedule that we're seeing here, that of something that's already been sold. It's
That's
just being
typical.
released.
I think that's
Yeah.
typical. And in that case, what you've probably got is people who are fairly passive, seeing this as an investment and a bet on the metaverse narrative and the Star Atlas vision, who have little to any desire to control what happens in the virtual world. Could be wrong, but it's definitely one to raise, I think, at the next town hall for clarification. But that would be my view looking at this. This is the vesting for the early investors, and the majority of those probably won't be super involved in the minutiae of what happens within the Star Atlas world.
Yeah, and I don't really have a problem with that. I think the challenge becomes when they do have the ability to influence gameplay one way or another, or maybe they have an opportunity to delegate the use of their capital, Polis, to somebody who is playing the game for a portion of the profits. I would be more aligned with that, but then it comes down to the haves and the have-nots, and how do they pick those people?
Right. So for those that are engaged in Polis, or at least that are Polis holders now with the intention of staking, we see the orange there mapped out as the rewards pool. But that's the rewards pool in Polis. One of the things that I think was mentioned in the town hall recently, or in this last town hall, is that this is not just reward that comes from the DAO staking or emissions there, and that they have allocated some of the Polis for missions and other ways that you can earn it. So this is inclusive of the DAO itself, but also ship missions and other ways within game that you can earn the rewards there. Is that how you guys heard it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So any other thoughts with Polis here? I mean, I think it was mentioned that, here's one other consideration. We do know that the 4Rs, so the expense that you have of ship missions now, at one point, I think it was about 150,000 worth of those, worth of the 4Rs that were monthly going into the DAO. We don't know what that would be used for. I think that's where DAO vote comes in. Is it distributed to DAO holders? Is it used for projects? How will it be used? And I'm sure that's gone up, because I think that was probably in December that we first heard that mention of how much was going in. And if now there's somewhere in the neighborhood of over 200 million in ships that are staked, is that right as well? I mean, I think at one point it was 150. I think it's gone over 200. So
with the leaderboard update, we can calculate around that, yeah, plus all the extra stuff.
So from a DAO perspective, when I think in terms of governance token, and this is just my own thinking, so I'm open to hearing anyone else share their thoughts on it. If you think that your thoughts on this is different. But when I think of a governance token in a new project, I think in terms of I am taking the risk alongside of the development team because the project is in its infancy and I want to support the project over time. That's what I think in terms of governance, rather than something I'm going to use as an in-game earning token. So if that's the case, what is a reasonable amount of return, or what does a person hope to get for that type of support within a project? Does 20%, does 19% work?
Well, there's a lot of traditional finance that would love 20%. So, I mean, I'm sure it's very appealing to some people, especially an investor class. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable return on a project.
Yeah, I guess the question is, what's the risk you're taking for that return? I think professional investors will, like we've been talking about, they'll have a framework, they will have a due diligence, which they will look at. They will look at the team, they will look at, do we think they can really deliver their vision? Do we think there is a greater than X% probability that they can evolve a sustainable economy? Is this thing possible? Which is cool and interesting, right? To bring different minds from different places into the equation to look at this and say, okay, let's gather all the data and see if we think this thing is a go or not. And the more people from different areas and different industries we can have looking, the better. I mean, that's why it's exciting overall, I think, to have these big tech players coming in and kind of incrementally putting on these metaverse plays in different shapes and forms, because it means you're going to have what I call the cognitive diversity looking at the problem is going to increase. We've all got probably little differences in our thinking, but we're all probably coming from a kind of crypto gaming background with similar sort of frameworks for how we look at these things.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing
people from completely different areas is gonna help.
I think we have to allow for the fact that some of the investment is dumb money as well, right? There's a lot of crypto millionaires out there who will throw money at anything. I mean, we've seen some pretty crazy investments just because they had the ETH.
Sure.
And there may be some of that in play as well.
So and there's just talking about different ways to approach it. From a gaming guild perspective, right now we see three primary buckets. We see the ship asset allocation, and there's an immediate return we can see from that, even if we're not looking at long-term gameplay and the influence within the game. We also see Polis, because Polis, right now, we're only looking at the DAO that's influential outside of the gameverse, but eventually it will be down to the faction level and even further down to the regional level. So there's some value in having influence as a guild to hold Polis for the in-game influence you can have. And then there's the bucket of land, which is not yet become available, but obviously being a landholder is going to be very influential from a gaming aspect. From the outside of, like for MMA, when you guys are looking at games as a project that you want to add to your portfolio, with Star Atlas, like how do you guys look at that bucket wise from those three buckets I just mentioned, the in-game currency and then the assets that are associated with it, Polis as a governance token, and then land sales? Like, how would you guys divvy that up? And like, what's the considerations?
Well, you need a bit of land. No, you need Polis to be able to govern land, and to transport or craft or do whatever you want to do with your land. You might also need ships. So it depends, like what your plans are.
I have a feeling they're going to be. It's going to be slightly more out of our control, and that they're going to be interlinked to the point where, like, exactly like Fancy said. I think there'll be margins where we can play with them, but I feel like in an ideal world, it's almost going to be proportionate.
Mm-hmm.
You can't achieve one. Our aspiration is to operate. I'll clarify that. There are plenty of guilds out there, of people that are listening that want to focus on one aspect of the game. I'll clarify that we want to look at this from like a broad spectrum where we're trying to be involved in a lot of aspects of the game, not just say one like bounty hunting or something, right? We want to have like a broad approach. And in that way, I think that it's going to, I mean, this is very subject to change. I think a proportionate amount is probably the most likely. What do you guys think about it?
I think it has to happen in phases. This is just my take on it. Like if you had said to me, here is X amount of dollars for resources, and we're at phase 1 of Star Atlas like 3 months ago, I would have probably done an equal allocation between Polis and Atlas, or not Polis, but ships at that time. The challenge with that is, like, for those of us that were invested in Polis early on, unless you maintain your holdings from the pre-IDO, a lot of folks are upside down in Polis right now. So there's a lot of wait to see how that does for you later on. The ships are doing great. The ships themselves as an asset class have gone up in value. So even if you got out of those ships, you're still doing well, while those ships are also producing return. But then that leaves that third bucket. I would approach it as land, to me, is a big consideration. I consider that legacy within the Star Atlas metaverse, because it's going to be one of those things, especially in safe zone, it won't ever be contested. Once you have it, it's legacy. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
So this week the leaderboards, they were updated again, so we could see all of the ships while they were staked, and that means we have like a clearer view of how everything's going. It's still the same order as it was, but yeah, Mud has a huge gap in assets from even second place. 20 million is a huge number.
Massive.
Yeah, and with, how is it, 4,000 less players, that's quite impressive, because that means they have more per player. But in the grand scheme of things, all of these 3 factions are going to be earning the same amount. It's so yeah, and then
it's interesting how they've balanced out over time. I mean, it's between 200 million in assets. You've been able to find people to pick a home between humans, aliens, and AI.
I look at those numbers a little bit differently. I'm suspecting that within ONI there's a lot of scholars. I mean, we know we have Tree, which has a lot of scholars brought with them.
Yep.
We know we have other guilds. MMA has probably maybe some scholars. I know we have scholars, but so there's a lot of scholars sitting in ONI, and I'm wondering if the player base there is actually positioned better for ONI in the long run once scholars are needed to start playing assets. Because the disparity is interesting when you see such a high value in Mud with a lower player count than you'd see in ONI.
Right. I think it depends a lot on what the crafting model and how you'll be able to leverage scholars, and what it will look like within a guild, a DAC, to be able to say, here's an asset, but we want these players to be able to utilize this asset. That's going to be a key ingredient to be able to allow people that aren't necessarily showing up with their own resources to be able to participate.
One of the things that I didn't get a chance to ask Casper and Dark Swoop is these ideas of a guild as a business,
right?
And knowing that Star Atlas is building DAC, the DAC framework within the game. I wonder how much Star Atlas is going to lean into the groups that are running a business to help support and create efficiencies for them, or if they're just going to build it based on what the community is providing and this is what we want. Or are they actually going to try to appease and bring in these gaming guilds?
Well, I don't know if it was on the town hall or Ash's space afterwards, but somebody did raise a question during one of those two about members of the team that are currently involved with guilds, right? And the insinuation from that question is obviously, to be blunt, do they have an unfair advantage? Now, in the future, if they would like to collaborate with us, we'd be more than happy to. I'm sure that a lot of guilds would exchange that same sentiment. I'm sure you guys would. It would be fantastic, especially considering some of the team are already working with respective guilds, right? I would personally like to see it, as there are already team members who are affiliated with guilds. I think to then go to those guilds who don't have any kind of official connection and leverage their knowledge if they have to have it, that seems like a sensible compromise if there's the possibility of, and although they stress it, and I believe them, I believe that they will make every step that they can to protect information and keep it a level playing field. That's a good way to actually almost give an incentive to the guilds that don't have a team member and leverage their knowledge and let them work and contribute towards the project. I think it would give it more of a community feel, which is ultimately what they're striving for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things that we didn't ask you earlier on, I'm curious this myself, like what kind of games were you into? Like what, from a gaming perspective, because I know that within the MMA world over there, you're the guy closest to games. So like,
Right.
what was your jam? Like what did you play even as a kid?
Slightly different actually, because often within our like community members and guild members, you often get a lot of people that are into like MMORPGs and like turn-based games. Personally, I was more into FPSs like Call of Duty and sports games like FIFA.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So actually, I've got a bit of a different background playing games to a lot of people. But on the other side of that, my experiences in mainstream gaming community, they're slightly different to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that I'm possibly. Did I freeze for a moment there? Apology.
A little bit, yeah.
I'm used to a different kind of. Yeah, you guys are probably. If you said that you played like World of Warcraft, yeah, you're probably really exposed to that community feeling, right? That really like. When you play in the sports games and things like that, you can often get a very different kind of community, especially in 1v1 situations. The toxicity in those kind of games, for example, is massive. I'll say that, as there's anyone out there that recognizes me, they'll know that, right? They'll know that. I find that really interesting, though, because these are the kind of people I want to see in the next 5 years migrate into P2E. I think, for example, some of the EA-owned sports games, where they have billions of dollars pumped into loot box style games.
Right.
The model of ownership where people could then withdraw their money back out instead of it being a one-way siphon into EA's pockets would be fantastic. It's a very blunt way of putting it, but there's opportunities for them to possibly even increase and expand their franchise's possibilities. What I found I've met a lot of phenomenal gamers actually. Mostly from turn-based games coming into Axie's got a lot to do with that, I'd say. I feel like if the Genesis big boom game had been something different to Axie, we'd see people different to those kind of players that have risen to the top. You know, if you look at the top content creators in Axie, you can see that they've succeeded in part due to their knowledge of similar games. I'd be interested to see when a more diverse range of games is available in the next 12 months, what kind of other content creators and people will like start to get a chance to shine in their community. Because for some gamers, Axie's not their cup of tea. Art style, gameplay, whatever it may be. Peg Axie is a horse racing simulator with one. It's not their cup of tea. I'd like to see what happens when people have a time to shine almost in the spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that will bring more people into the space when there's something that appeals to them.
Right.
I've tried to sell things like Axie. It's a hard sell if people aren't interested in that kind of stuff.
Right. So with a first-person shooter like Call of Duty, and especially the way it's evolved over the years, how do you see that being implemented into play to earn? Is it like a team thing, like capture the flag where the winner takes a pot? I mean, how would that work?
I think if you look strictly at Call of Duty and the route they've taken in the last few years away from a loot box model, I think the ownership of the in-game skins for the guns, character skins, whatever it is, and have some kind of currency attached to them instead of a dollar value to the store. Right now, if you want to buy the most recent, I'm trying to think of it in dollars, but if you want to buy the most recent operator skin with a gunner skin attached to it, you put £20 into the game, you get it, you own it.
Yeah.
That's a one-way service. That's it forever. If they could have a system where you could still have the option to buy it with US dollars, but you play a game, you earn a Atlas equivalent, 100, and you have to save up 10,000, 15,000. Fantastic. You have an option to buy said skin. However, what if somebody doesn't want to? You then have the option to sell that you've generated to somebody else who wants to. You're effectively doing the labor. You're playing to earn.
Yeah.
It all comes down to how much of the pie does the developer and the publisher want to keep for themselves, and if and why would they transfer to that model?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we're seeing some pushback, like the Ubisoft, where people didn't like the ideas with them coming out with NFTs. We're seeing Steam as a game company making a hard stance and saying we are not supporting any blockchain games on our platform. So it's interesting how everyone is starting to take a bit of a stance. And then the question that I think still stands out there is, if you have an ecosystem that's closed, what is your incentive for opening it up and making it more accessible to individuals to own their stuff, unless the market demands it. And I think we're a long way from the market necessarily demanding it, especially for those types of games.
I think the only option, in my opinion, is necessity. You've hit the nail on the head there, really. The benefit to the player is immeasurable. If I sit down and play the most recent Call of Duty for X amount of time, but there is an option for me to some way recoup my time in money, that's amazing for me. Wow. I get to sell my skins, my my customization options, my reticles for a little bit of money when I'm finished in the game cycle. That's great for me. How does it benefit the publisher? How does it benefit the developer? Short answer is, well, the only option I can see is a marketplace tax, 5%. Perhaps if they do some internal calculations and studies, perhaps that transaction fee and still having the option to purchase them directly could make them more money, maybe. But I think it's going to have to be necessity. I think we're going to need to see projects like Star Atlas and many of us to come smash it out the park. It almost start to become accepted and lean towards becoming the norm or something that's very normal. And then that way, perhaps we might start to see it integrated. But it's a money game ultimately, isn't it? It's about business. And if it doesn't suit them from a business point of view right now, they're not going to do it for our benefit.
Right.
Yeah, I see a lot of adoption being prolonged from the inner fightings and percentages that are going to have to take place between the creators. If there's going to be a whole conversation amongst the game developers, the company itself, and then the player base not even wanting them. So does that mean they go down that route? Do they just force it through the door? So there's too many turning wheels that need to kind of work together there, where most of those complications are dealt with much easier here in the DeFi space when it comes to NFT gaming.
Yeah. And I think I've just seen a YouTube comment come through from Blah the Zombie saying that people are stuck on NFTs being JPEGs and not utility based.
Yeah.
This comment here. And I think that's another thing that will really come into bringing this into the mainstream, or bringing the mainstream to us, is actually knowledge and education about the utility of NFTs. It's purely anecdotal, but my experience from people I know or people I interact with on Twitter, from mainstream gaming or otherwise, just people in general walks of life, the education is still quite lacking. People hear NFT, they either don't know what it is or they think of Bored Ape. If I tell them, actually, you can own a ship in this game that's going to be like this, they prick their ears and they're interested, but it's not what they think of first or even second.
So that raises an interesting question. So as the leadership of Rome, we've been giving some thought to, like, how would we want to go about making an NFT for within our guild? And we want to do it for a couple reasons. One is we want the commemorative aspect, because we really are a community and we want to recognize people that have been a part of the community for some time, and also now in this infancy, before we really have the ability to be boots on the ground as a guild within a game world like Star Atlas. Like, what are you guys' thoughts on what some of the draws are for an NFT beyond being a profile picture? Like, what makes, like, we've seen some communities NFTs that have done really well because it is.
Your mic is underwater.
Yeah, but one
it's
thing for
swing.
me is low supply. That's always a great indicator. Active team. We've gone through this a bit. What else do you guys think? I would love to hear in the comments too.
Yeah,
For sure.
100%. I think ultimately, when I think of utility, I think that there's a lot of possibilities that haven't been explored yet. But in my opinion, I want something, if I'm playing a game, I like cosmetics and I like functionality. Like you've mentioned just there about what could the functionality and the utility of that be. Well, there you go. I've just seen the comment come up from the YouTube there. There's some fantastic suggestions coming in here as well. I know you're going to touch on the Snoop Dogg thing as well later, whether it be music creatively. I just want to give something that makes people feel unique and actually has an application. The other thing I'll say is, though, hopefully with the games, cosmetics aren't for everybody. There are plenty of people that play a game, like I'll say straight up, you go back to my Call of Duty home base example, there are a lot of people that don't care about skins. They play the game to play the game. They'd much rather it be tied to something that has a function, an actual in-game item, and obviously then that comes back around to the pay-to-win argument we touched on a while ago.
Utility is king.
But yeah, exactly. What would your favored utility be if you had one for your NFT, if you end up producing it soon? In a dream scenario where there's no No restrictions. What ultimate utility are we going for?
Well, quite an easy one would be being able to like have an NFT to view like private live streams. If Twitch integrated that, that would be awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's moving in that direction, so maybe other platforms will make it so that, yeah, you can restrict access to certain content based on an NFT. My concern about restricting access as it relates to an NFT, though, is how does that work if that means anybody that has that NFT, whether they're a part of your group or not, if they have the means to get that NFT, they just instantly have access to any place within your guild? So that presents a challenge that I don't personally know how to account for.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's one of the things that we've discussed before internally. If you offer that, for example, you offer access to a private stream. What if they break your terms of service or do something and you want to ban them?
Right.
It's a strange example, but then you're in a paradox there. You've offered somebody unlimited access to something, and then you want to take it away immediately. How do you do that, though? Because the second that you have the autonomy to stop one person, there's a lot of things, and it's. I'm pleased to see Twitter moving in a direction where they're embracing it, but there's a lot of questions for a lot of different offerings to come up with.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for access is transferability. Guilds need a closed environment by their very nature to avoid people understanding what they're going to do. And once you start using it to unlock channels or unlock rooms, all it takes is one person to either lose it, or sell it, or get pissed and just, transfer it and open the door to anybody else. So to me, NFTs within a guild are more about recognition and awards, maybe whitelisting for future airdrops. Maybe there's a guild uniform that down the line you build for the guild in Star Atlas, and anyone who has that NFT is going to get that uniform. Those types of things.
Yeah, great ideas. I think I might run through the last of the Star Atlas content so Ray can move on to Axie. So we looked at this ship, and there was also this. We do know from previous pictures that it's the Thimble Lobby.
Right.
But there were some interesting guesses out there.
Ronald, is that you? My long lost friend.
Yeah, I found this in the community. I thought it was quite funny.
Great.
Also, this week there was Marble Photoli. That's how I'm calling them.
Marble fish. I like
I
it.
haven't seen this one.
Yeah, it looks really awesome.
I like it,
It might not be Photoli, but aren't they supposed to be like beings of light? This looks quite solid.
Mm-hmm.
Good question.
The marketplace rolled out just some simple UI changes. So sell orders, buy orders. They changed the wording on that from ask and can't remember the other one, but it's a bit clearer now if you're using it for the first time. It also tells you the fee that it requires. So another just nice thing they added. And they also released this, which I'm really interested in.
More power.
Yeah.
So when we see something like that, does that mean that that's just going to be, they're just showing us the mechanics of how they're building out 3D models of ships? Or is this to suggest that when you upgrade firepower and components on your ship, that would be a modular component?
I think it's the latter. I think we know that there's going to be visible modules and components that attach to your ship. That looks like a hard point that they're demonstrating or building towards.
Yeah, what I find interesting, so this is the Pierce R8. If you look at like the cylinder and the wires below it, it's quite recognizable on the picture when I bring it up.
Huh.
If you zoom in on the tank, you can see the piston and where it would be attached. And I think it's quite interesting that all the like stock pictures we have now, they are like kind of naked in a way. They're going to look much more beefed up when we have all of these things attached on.
Right. Interesting, yeah.
I like it.
Yes, big gun.
Yeah, but in all honesty, it might not be because this isn't a fighter; it's a fueler. So it might just not be enough to protect itself, or maybe just. I don't think it's going to be. You're going to need other ships with you around when you have this fueler coming out.
Yeah,
to refuel. It's not going to hold its own by any means. I don't think.
It's got a Jod Asterisk in the background, and you can see that, which is also
Oh
being
yeah,
textured in the engine.
that's right.
Without texture, I mean. Yeah, solid stuff. Still waiting to see more on this one. It isn't the picture that we looked at previously. It's just a different design. You
Right.
can tell straight away when you look at it.
Still, we're thinking that that's a possibility that that's a drone. Still potentially, maybe.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
The other one has more of a booster at the back, which makes it a little more simplistic compared to this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was pretty much it. Yeah.
Sweet.
There was something else that I think is worthy of discussing and maybe theory crafting about what it's going to be, but they acknowledged there was going to be new incentives for Atlas coming up soon. I'm not quite sure if it was a staking piece or
Yeah,
if you
they
were
have
going to be
talked
earning it a
about.
different way.
They've talked about single-sided Atlas staking in the past, and I think that's getting closer to being rolled out. They're also doing optimizing the mobile user interface, so you'd be able to place score on your phone with the iOS wallet Phantom, and Android is coming soon.
Yeah.
So most single-sided staking mechanisms are really just a fair distribution process, right? It's a way to get more tokens out into the space. Have they said anything about that? Does anybody know more about what they plan to do?
Not
No,
here.
huh?
No.
Time will tell, I guess.
All right.
Yeah, and there was a really interesting quote from Wagner as well when he was talking about the showroom. So you'll be able to view your assets at scale. There will be some exploration, and it's quite a large map that you can explore. Great environment for various communities to have their own town halls or guild meetings. So it seems like it's going to be a bit more dynamic than just like a see your NFT
Yeah.
and buy, which is really good.
So they intend to have it multiplayer upon release. So it means you will be able to roam around and have
I
the
think they
Second
said
Life
ideally
convos and chat with people.
Yeah, they're aiming for that.
aiming
But
for it, yeah.
if it's not available at launch, then it'll be like a single player, and multiplayer will be like a future functionality.
Yeah,
It'd be
I
pretty-
wonder,
the showroom for sure.
if it's multiplayer, by nature of it being multiplayer, you have to have all the characters finished as well, right? Including the sizes, the clothing, the skins. You can't just have a bunch of stick avatars running around.
So is that a selection process then? So once
Right,
you select your avatar, so to speak, are you committed to that? Is that now on chain? Can you swap between races? Yeah, I'm curious what that will look like if that has to be in place in time.
So yeah, that's all the notes from Star Atlas this week. Do we want to move on to Snoop Dogg quickly before Axie?
Sure.
This is gonna be a long conversation.
Who wants to take this one?
Partially painful conversation. So, I
Yeah.
mean, the backstory for people is that Gala Games, who now has about 9 or 10 games in their arsenal, have decided to branch out into Gala music. And so now their marketing is positioning why music is a complement to games and vice versa. And so out of the box, the stash box here is their deal with Snoop. And that's in addition to Snoop, it sounds like they're also doing stuff with Steve Aoki and probably have some others lined up. But yeah, this is a tricky one. $5,000 for a box. I don't know. Does that get you a song? Because there's like an album of like 17 songs total. Yeah. What do we know about this other than the fact that there's 25,000 available at 5,000 a pop, which is like 130 million, something like that.
So here's my best understanding. There's an album that's being released. It's 17 songs. 3 of the songs are exclusive to Gala. Ownership does not mean you get royalties. These songs can still play on Spotify. So really what you're doing is you're hoping that you stake this NFT into their now launched music network or upcoming launched music network, which they're also selling node licenses for. And every time this song gets played, if you own it, you get 3.5 cents per song when it's played. So if you think
Per
about
play.
they refuse to accept the word investment, which is a bunch of bullshit. But if you think about the investment of this, you're going to spend $5,000 and it's going to take how many you're not the only person who owns this NFT, right? So how many plays is it going to take to get your return back? And then to add further insult to a critical mind.
Yes, injury. We are injured.
Yeah. Is the nodes, they're not saying how many nodes they're going to sell, right? And they're not giving the tokenomics of their Gala music coin. So there's so much just absolute trust that you have to provide this company that this is going to be something that's going to be beneficial to you. But in their words, you're supporting the net. You're supporting the spirit of what they're doing, right?
Right.
It's a boondoggle.
This is a good comment by Plunger. Sailors over today, rest is burned.
So how many owners are there now? When you took this screenshot, there were just under 2,000. So I'm curious how many there will be before the burn.
I'm not sure, but unlimited nodes.
Yeah.
Because they're going to release more songs, I assume. And different artists, and listen to own.
So the potential for it long term, like I could see how things like this could be a success. I just think that it's too. Like the sales of it all and how it's presented, and with the frequency of just the different projects that are presented. Maybe there's just that ultimate mastermind behind it that maybe we can't grasp the whole picture here. But
I've got a few questions if you guys could enlighten me.
Sure.
Per play, we've just discussed how much. On what platform is that being played?
Gala Music, which is basically the nodes that you're hosting, and each play they've said is the equivalent of 10 cents USD.
And exclusively just that platform?
Yes.
But they're not limited to that platform. Again, if people want to go to Spotify and hear that album, that completely bypasses the Gala Music network.
What's the incentive to someone to come to Gala Music instead of Spotify or YouTube?
That's the question.
That's
I don't know that there is a draw. And then there's
I'll
also
forward
audience.
that clip onto them.
There's people in the space that are blockchain like Audius. So there's other music plays in the space as well that have that's their main focus. So it's not like they decided to do, hamburgers and car seats.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know what the draw is. I'm curious to know.
Well, and now we're in a position where we've got a game developer who is selling NFT upon NFT, one real working game, one that's almost about to launch, and they're spreading themselves into music. And I'm going to make a guess that they're going to spread themselves into media, and potentially something showed up in their Gala Gold sneak peeks that I won't talk about, but it made absolute no sense to me. It's another industry that a game developer has no business getting into. So it just seems like they want to print NFTs for whoever they can and rake in the money and not do anything for it. That's my impression.
Yeah. And as I already mentioned the other day, that I was doing a little bit of homework on the amount. And if we exclude the one playable game, which is Townstar, and we exclude the high NFT sales of Miranda, so we took those two out, there's still over $900 million in marketable NFTs across all their other games that aren't even playable yet.
So that's insane of a number. But I was just thinking, do we see other artists flocking to Gala Music to do the same thing Snoop Dogg has done? And does this get rid of the middleman? Is this a real, true, decentralized way for artists to claim their sovereignty back? From the middleman taking all the profits.
Well, the payout for the musicians is not bad. It's 5 cents per play, which is far better than they'll get on Spotify, right? But I just don't think they have the people there to get the volume of plays that they need to make the good money. And just in fairness to Gala Music, some of the other artists are Snoop Dogg, Steve Aoki, Kings of Leon, Maroon 5, Bassjackers, which we know from Star Atlas. So they are drawing in some talent, but people are going to print Gala to buy Gala Music tokens to spend it on a Gala locked universe or a locked node system. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, in theory, I like the idea of supporting the artists more. I do. I already pay $9.99 for a Spotify subscription.
Right.
Other than the pull of supporting the artists more and the people that own the nodes, I'd be really interested if they could provide some information as to what other reason I would migrate.
How many plays? How many songs a month do you think you listen to, Dark? On Spotify?
Probably about just over 200.
Okay, 200. So we're talking $20 a month.
Yeah.
You would pay for Gala at 10 cents a play, right? So they have to do better than $9.99 a month if they want to draw people over. And right now the economics aren't there.
Yeah. And as I already mentioned, while I don't know the model, there is already plays in this space like Audius. I don't know their model, but I know that the concept is, again, trying to look for a decentralized model where the artist gets compensated more for their work, their content. So yeah, I wish they would explain more about what they think they bring to the table that is missing. What are they solving for?
Yeah. Well, I don't. Well, they're solving for their checkbook is what I think they're solving for. But I did the math, and I think the node was $1,200. And if you didn't stake any NFTs into it, node holders get 10% of every song that's played. So each song is 10 cents. You get 1 penny for every play as a node holder. But the nodes are unlimited. They haven't talked about how many there are. So if you at 10,000 nodes, which is very conservative for Gala, right? I mean, they're shooting their founders nodes up into 30,000. It's like 1.2 billion plays just to make your money back. It just doesn't make any sense.
But did I read this right? That the transaction, though, that takes place, actually the transaction is compensated to the founders node network somehow. Did I read that correctly somewhere?
I think they said they were doing it temporarily until they get the music network up. Founders, that's just a distribution system for Gala, in my opinion. They're getting screwed left and right by Gala.
What else we got, Fancy?
Well, it's Ray's turn, really, if he wants to go over Axie.
You got some Axie stuff for us?
Yeah, I got some Axie stuff for you.
All right, Dark Swoop. He's Axie savvy. He can weigh in here as well.
Yeah.
Your thoughts.
I pulled this together. Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be cool. The latest update has been the release of lots of content on Origin V3. So that's pretty exciting. And I'm gonna run through some of the artwork before we get to what actually is taking place with the release of Axie Origin V3. So here we can see there's a plethora of information and details to speculate on, but also that are explained to us in the article. And there's great YouTube videos that cover, and also theorycraft on what we don't know yet. But it's just a great picture to look at. Right? So we're gonna have our new cards that are coming out with ears and eyes. So we're gonna have some effects and different cards, including Dawn and Dusk. So that's great. So I'm just gonna pull through these, and we'll get to a list at the end. And by all means, comment on how lovely this all looks in your eyes, if you like. No pressure. Yeah, for you as well, Dark Soup. Do you have anything that stands out to you from any of these?
I think the art style change, as long as it's taken, I really like it, actually. I was a little bit worried when I spoke about it a week ago, and then went onto Axie Chat just before all this stuff was released. But I think it's a good update. If you think about how, in the time that they've had to do this in relation to what they've done, it's good.
Right.
I'm more, when it comes down to it, for example, have you got one of the screens where the Axies are actually in play?
Bam.
So what I'm really interested in is, one of the first notes in the Substack is about the sequential turns that are coming in, and the new fast pace. I do think that the style and the art style of the design does suit that a lot, and I think it will make there's a lot of room to maneuver on that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
What do the rest of you guys that have maybe not seen this before think is not outsiders, but people looking at it fresh?
I'm just going to withhold my comment because I'm not a big fan of Axie, but the art's cute.
A one.
So I'm the biggest proponent for Axie here in Rome. So just for the record, if those are watching from MMA or just in general, whoever joined recently Rome. And so here's just a compiled list. And I can kind of breeze through and do a condensed form of Axie updates here when there could be a whole long form as well. That's done with, I'll throw out Axie Chat. Kudos to them. Shout out. They do a great job on and MMA was recently on Axie Chat as well, so you could always check them out if you know about Axie Chat. You could go to their Discord or their Twitter, and so here's a list that we could just breeze through just to mention it. And if you could always screenshot or pause the video if you're watching. But these are one of the many things that are going to be taking place. So we got 3 free Axies. So now you're going to have people able to play with free Axies to get used to and get comfortable or try it out, test it out, and then potentially buy in their own team. That's a much better team, I guess, than you'll get that are free to play.
So those free to play just get you in the game and you get your ass handed to you the whole time. Is that kind of what happens?
Well, not necessarily. You could be playing adventure mode, right? So we'll have
true.
adventure mode, and that's going to be a whole experience in itself. I'm sure it will be, as it's going to be updated, and it'll probably be you'll be having your led by your hand playing the game to understand more. So that's going to be a pretty good to sell more people on Axie Infinity.
I definitely believe that they're going to focus the builds more on PvE.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it would be a bad incentive to give people a really strong PvP team as by default and let them run havoc on people that have spent quite a considerable amount of money. I have a feeling it's going to be mostly
right
for the AI. But I like it as a concept. It's a good change.
Yeah. So just no SLP or AXS in Origin Alpha stage. So it's just going to get people acclimated to what's going on without the earning potential blinding them. And so that's just going to be great. And then we got Battle V2, which is the current, what we know of as the Battle Arena system. Maybe shut down in season 0 of Origin Battle V3. So mid-season, for season 20 of the Arena mode, we might see some change taking place. So prepare yourselves. And so we got Battle V3 cards played immediately, no delay in turns, like Dark Suit mentioned earlier. We'll see how that goes, as they did increase the speed of the animations. Not increase the speed, they more or less lined it up because there was a delay. So that's what technically happened, but it seems like it's sped up, aside from them being on the ground now versus hovering. Energy and cards reset every round, so no more card saving and saving energy and cards. So I guess that contributes to the play speed. Most cards will be either attack or defense, not both. So eyes and ear cards will now have value. All 6-part cards have use now, which is going to be amazing. There's going to be such an amount of different combinations to be had with the cards and different teams. What do you guys think about the? I'll just continue going. Stop me if you have an opinion.
There were 2 parts that weren't functional, right?
All right.
And so what we're now is basically another 50% of the is factored in for those 2 new parts. That's substantial. Yeah. I mean, that changes gameplay, and it probably also changes the value of whatever spec you're running now for your teams.
Right. It's going to definitely throw a wrench in the machine of what people think are meta teams, because you might have 2 out of the 6 body parts that are favorable to be something of a different class that just work better synergistically. Yeah, you might. Go ahead.
I was saying, being that you guys at MMA, you run quite a few teams. What has been the impact now that you have these additional variables thrown in the mix?
I'm hoping actually that it'll bring. We've got we up until the point it became unfeasible. We used to breed a lot, if not all of our Axies. And as a byproduct of that, we've got a lot of, we were using them for energy Axies instead of selling them for the longest time. We've got a lot of very funky creations going on with mixed body parts and stuff. And bringing value to those parts is fantastic. I think that's another really good change. We could probably find a lot of value in some pretty oddball combinations there. Yeah. And to the point previously about the changes in the gameplay system, that's where I am still personally mulling it over and reflecting on it. I believe that the lack of delay bringing the energy. You're removing aspects of strategy for me.
Mm.
And I am interested to see how that plays out. On the other side of the equation, I do see it as just a new kind of strategy.
Right.
And the community sentiment around stalling tactics of old that relied a lot on. I mean, on a personal level, I'm not upset by that at all. That's fine with me. I'd rather not play a game that goes to 15 turns and we end up having HP chipped away at the end.
Right.
I'd much rather that. Is just in my opinion. But generally, there's a lot of changes here, though. That's the thing I'd like to really like. Anyone from MMA that's watching, we went through such a barren spell of not having anything. And in fact, I believe I spoke to you guys last week about saying that I wanted to see more changes. And suddenly we get this dropped on us out of nowhere after the leaks that we had on Axie Chat on Wednesday. Time.
Right. With
It's
the
a lot
power
to
ups.
digest. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's that tug of war and push and pull of what's going to not be what everyone's used to. And then, again, getting acclimated to the new style. So you might not maybe go to round 21, depending on the cards and how they're used, but there's going to be something that's exciting that people come to like after they continue playing.
Yeah.
So
I like it.
But definitely the value that's added to our Axies are going to be great with those eyes and ears. I really like that part. Then we just got power going down the list here with my cursor. You got power up Axie abilities with runes and charms. So these are just going to be things that are going to be added to power up your Axies in battle and charms alike. And then we need to earn moon shards to craft runes and charms. So there's that gamification of runes and charms, where moon shards are the ones that are able for you to craft runes and charms. Non-NFT wearables that increase Axie abilities. So these are not going to be, this is off-chain, and they won't be able to be traded or sold. So, yeah. And, speculation around that, can you save them and then use them even if there's rotation of different charms and craft runes? There was some talk about there being different type of charms and craft runes for so they'll go out of style, but then there's going to be a new set that you could craft with your moon shards. So would you still be able to use the ones that fell out of popularity because now there's been a change, and still if you just harvest and made a whole bunch of them? So that was one of the questions I had while I was going through this. And then to craft more powerful NFTs, NFT-based runes and charms, you need moon shards plus SLP. So now we got that. This is the first sign of an additional sync here for SLP, where you're going to have to incorporate or use them together with moon shards, and then you can create a more powerful charm or rune for your Axie. So each new season, old renewals and charms will be removed, and you need to basically,
Hunt.
Pretty much hunt for new ones. So continuing on, unused moon shards also expire each season. There you go. So that answered my question. And
so most of these, I gotta imagine. So like for me, even though that I've played Axie limited, I have scholars in Axie. I've been a part of the project just from a micro investment standpoint. Like, what would you say the bulk of these changes mean? Not only to the person, like there's people listening that are familiar with Axie more than I am, that are like, oh, this is cool and this is awesome. But for the person outside of the project, what do these changes really mean? And are they going to light up the project and bring back some of what made Axie great?
Well, the next 2 points on the list, where it goes on to say no more random critical hits and simplified stats with faster gameplay. Turner speed, which there's another type. Speed points have no value, only HP hit points. Right. What you're seeing along with the things about to do with battle on the left-hand side is there's been a lot of simplification. And how people in the community react to that, I am not sure. I personally would have preferred more strategies as opposed to less. And like I say, I'm happy to be proven wrong. But when you take away stats and change the effect of cards, the card change, just to elaborate on it, they're going to be changing what the function is. They're either going to be mostly, as it says, their attack or defense. I would expect if you looked at the project in isolation, normally with turn-based card games, you'd expect the change over time to be more features and more like calculations and numbers and variables, not backtracking to one or the other. This is a simplification to me. They've taken away critical hits is one of those things. There was a stat allocated to that on the face value of the cards. Do people like it? Depends. I don't mind if it's gone. Randomness is one of those things. I don't think it has a place in esports and competitive. Actually, that's really not something I think should be in there. But again, it's just another thing where they've streamlined the experience. Starter X's now as well. People are going to get introduction to the game. They have a chance to access and play it. That's good. When the price of SLP was, and it was for the last 6 weeks, was anyone struggling to get a scholarship? I'm not sure. It's good. Right. I'll give them credit. They put a lot of changes, or they're planning to implement a lot at once. Quite a brave move by the team. The aspects about crafting the runes and charms and then having to do it again each season and stuff, that's a good cycle. That'll keep people playing. That's a good one of those like positive little cycles that you do each season. Each season, new rooms, new charms, new crafted. Doesn't carry over. But I've just seen there as well, where they don't carry over after each season. Does that reward people? I don't know.
I'm thinking from just an initial question, it technically will become more fun. If there's going to be more things for you to do, which is this rotation of crafting, it adds that extra, thing to do, which could increase your chances of winning. And if you're winning to play and earn, then there you go. Right. So, and then if you take part in arena mode, there's just going to be more to do. And along with the updated art, it could be appealing to more people, prior to just it being the way it was, and then people just not liking the art. This is an upgrade, an upgrade on the art. So maybe now it appeals to those who thought the art was crap, in a different way than just it being colorful and not in that way. So if it's more fun, which they always talk about the team wanting to make the game, then this might be the right move that they've been planning all along to get more people interested.
Yeah, I guess to answer Jesse's earlier question in 2 sections now, I've discussed it out loud and heard your thoughts. I think the game's going to be more fun to play. I think it's going to be more fun to look at and as an experience. So as a game, exclusively as a game, good. In terms of as a P2E game, I'm not sure. And I don't mean that in like it's not going to happen. I mean, I just need to see what happens.
Exactly.
I don't see anything to sway my opinion either way here.
And that's the thing. You can't really sway anyone's opinion unless this is actually implemented fully to the extent that they're going to release it, and then we see that essentially that new economy grow, or the changes of the economy take place to see what will happen, how the cards fall.
I would have expected perhaps a single extra SLP burn mechanism in there, considering the amount of changes.
Yep.
That's one thing I think is absent. However, having discussed it the other day and actually chat the summary, what the conclusion we came to is they've recently done the testing mechanism for burning Xyz and gifting them. I assume if it was in a completely functional state, they would have put it in here. So I imagine it's probably still under development. Yeah. There's no reason for them to choose not to put it there.
Exactly. And because it's already a successful test with well over 100,000 burned Xyz, I think that's just going to be automatically incorporated as a way to maybe, get a more powerful charm. It could be a something next to an SLP plus a moon shard option to get a more powerful or different charm.
For an understanding of scale, like what percentage of Axes was that? Is that like a 0.25%? How many Axes are there? If you burned 100,000, what is the impact?
Well, I'm thinking there's over 600,000 on the market, or it got knocked down 100,000 plus since the initial release. I think it was over like $22 million worth of Axes. If correct me if I'm wrong, it's in the range of a double digit, millions worth. So, there's people want to use their Axes for something else, and this just proves that even with no utility on these items yet, because they're land items that you're receiving for sending your Axes to the death camps, but or releasing them, just play on the words. But hey, there was all the speculation that these Axes that are being sent to a specific wallet address are going to be used for the play to earn the 3 free to play Axes that people would be using. So the more you burn, and the more the different utilization for burning axes in the future will just roll over into providing more free to play axes for people. So hand helps hand, I guess, but we'll see how many people are we'll see how much demand there is for people using the free to play axes, and then if they don't play, what happens if it was the case that you're using those axes that were sent on a journey. So so it's pretty cool. Lots of things to look forward to, and then here we just have the full article that you can check out. It's just this is season 20 is live now. This is on their Twitter. You can check that out. And with that, we have it's 6 weeks long, so I think it's the longest running. And it starts February 9th, and then onwards to March 22nd. So within that time, you'll have close to $70 million worth of rewards that get distributed to the top. What was it now? 300,000. Yep. So top 300,000 players. So ranging from the top first place to 300,000th place, and that range of reward. Yeah.
And to be fair to them, although they can be diluted a bit at the bottom, it is a generous pool. That is a very generous for a 6-week period.
Sure.
That's good. It's a good incentive to get people up there. And I hope that we help to see a lot of guilds encouraging their players to work hard and get up there and keep everything that they earn themselves.
Absolutely.
It's a really good incentive.
So I have a question for you guys, especially the two of you that are very familiar with Axie on a daily basis.
Yeah.
What is the impact of others that come into the space? Like, obviously, one that's gathered a lot of attention recently is Pig Axie, and it seems like they're doing a lot of things right, and as in they paid attention to what was happening in the space, the successes of Axie, and then they came forth with their own burn mechanism and the way that they do things. Does that support the space overall? Does it take away daily active users from Axie? What's the impact of new players coming in the space?
I'm going to try and give you a very detailed answer very quickly on that.
Awesome.
Peg Axie coming into the space, it's very apparent to me that the leadership team and the management structure there learned a lot of lessons from Axie. Right. I would really like to see Axie continue to then in turn learn from what they're executing. That competition could turn out to be fantastic for their economy if they learn in return that way. 2, Axie, I think ideally some of the changes we had last week and discussed, they want to reduce the amount of SLP being minted. Right. In a strange way, if a small amount of players migrate to a different game, that's ultimately reducing the amount of SLP being minted, which is a good thing for Axie's economy. There can be too much of a good thing. Too many people. You've only got to look at the trajectory of Axie's economy in a year. I don't think they accounted for the amount of people that ended up playing it. It would have been. It's an incredible achievement by the team, but probably far beyond what they've accounted for. And more games coming into the space is more lessons to learn. And perhaps while Axie still continues to adjust and fix its economy, it's just another way to reduce the amount of SLP being minted. Axie still got a phenomenally popular backbone there on social media and Twitter. There are a lot of Axie Maxis that are in this for the long run, man. Like, their community is not going anywhere quickly. So things coming onto the space, lessons to be learned and opportunities to get maybe just a little less SLP minted.
Yeah.
Any thoughts as to what the chain as a whole is going to do, and what the future of the Ron token, and what are they doing there? Is there any new alpha, anything that's sitting out there that you guys have heard?
Well, not technically with Ron specifically, but the bigger picture here with what they're accomplishing with the release of it is that they're going to put on some interesting IPs. Projects that want to build on top, and they can be very selective here and not need to worry and pick who they want. That's going to be which is going to be a success right out the gate. Like, so they have the money, they have the attention, they have everything they need, and they could take the time, which I would recommend they do, to just really flush out and get some project building on that we might all well know is a popular game from the traditional space.
Yeah.
To then just blow everything out the water. Like Gala Games, it's hard to not pay attention to them, whether you like them or not, because of just what they're doing. Yeah. So, and the names that are coming on, like Walking Dead, Snoop Dogg, from all the different angles. So if Axie is focusing on just games as a game development then they're gonna be the best at that, I believe.
Yeah.
There'll be competition, but
As Dark Swoop mentioned, I think it's great if they are also paying attention to improvements that have been made
Yeah.
outside of the space. They now have this chain, they've got this platform, and they've got a nice wad of cash sitting there. So it'd be pretty cool if we saw some great projects, whether through acquisition or through partnership, find their way to the Ronin chain, and they learned from some of the things like what Pegaxy's doing with their rental program versus me having to pay scholars and go that route. So if they take the best of what people are discovering in this space through trial and error and observation, and then take some really cool games that are fun to play and put that on chain on Ronin, I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
That's my best hope for what Axie will do news wise within 2022.
Right. For as long as I can remember, they always said that it wasn't on the top of their list, as it was a surprise that it blew up scholarship programs the way they did. So what they did was provide Scatter, which is a part of the release of Ronin, where you can pay in bulk all of your scholars by just adding their addresses. So it was a nice tip of the hat to, we recognize the community and the demand that they want, or that they're calling for, to help the scholar managers and the guilds to make it easier, because we saw a lot of innovation and Discord bots being created by devs to just have this easily done within the Discord, where scholars can write a command and then get paid out their share by percentage. So it was almost like the community was ahead of the game in development than Sky Mavis was with Axie Infinity to help guilds. But again, they were vocal for as long as I've been in the project, since October 2020, before scholarships were even a thing, that it wasn't something they ever were planning to do, like Pegaxy did. So, but sure enough, I'm sure as time goes on, we're going to have similar situations in games, just like DeFi Kingdoms. You could rent out, Fancy Burns, you could rent out Pegaxy, rent out. So it's just a natural evolution, I think. That's taking place.
This is all part of the process, isn't it? And it's kind of what we've just touched on with Pegaxy, right? They didn't plan to have the scholarship model in October 2020, but they ended up having it. Right. Pegaxy has now implemented something which is an almost seamless effort. If we can see something like that before 2023 in Axie, that would just be unbelievable.
Hell yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
And then that's an example of competition coming into the space and actually benefiting both parties involved.
Yep.
And that's something I'd love to see continue.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen, because why wouldn't they? They're just going to grow off of everyone getting pumped on the scholarship program and then ignore them completely after the fact. That's the majority of the population of what made Axie. So they're not just going to forget about them. It might take a little while. They might get rid of the mercenaries, as G-Host calls them, instead of the missionaries, and they're going to just not see a return and get out and move on. And that's technically not what you would want for any project you're a part of, especially if you have members of a guild. You wouldn't want those mercenaries in your guild just to be around, knowing that that's all they care about. So it goes both ways. But just moving on here, we got the Phil Law from Niantic, who is a developer on Pokemon Go. He just was onboarded, and that was a big back on February 7th. And so today we welcome the new game product lead, Phil Lott, to the team, and Scott Mavis will oversee product management of Origin and Land, as well as the overall Axie Infinity economy and game roadmap. So you could check out his thoughts on this particular. So if you go back on the Axie Infinity page, I invite people to do that so they'll get a better idea about Phil. And since this was announced, we had a plethora again of just information, and expect that to continue, because that's just the way it needs to be moving forward. You can't go backwards, or else it's not going to be looking good. And last but not least, I think that was it. Yeah. So other than that, it's looking okay for Axie, in my opinion, and I'm excited for this Origin Vs3 to actually be a thing to play.
My last question about Axie there is what do you think it was about the mechanic of this new season that actually gave what it almost looked like a 300% pump in SLP price from its all-time low within the past month or so, at least, when it was down under sub 1 cent, and now it popped back to 3.5 or 3, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was sat at about it was just under 3 cent when I checked it before we came on. I think the confidence in the project, I think a big boost, but I monitored this up until Wednesday when I had a big thing on Axie Chat, right? there was actually no discernible reason for it to go up other than goodwill in the project. But that kind of speaks for itself. That was a big jump at a time when the burn rate was still very low in comparison to the min. That was a big jump. And then most of that, I believe, is, like I just said, come down to confidence in the project and a renewed sense of optimism.
Yep.
I don't really see any other reason right now other than that to be the case. People are driving the price up again for the first time in God knows how long because they see it having further utility. And that was what drove it to that crazy peak back in July, early August, wasn't it? It's people buying it to do breeding and seeing utility in the token and wanting it to have it because they see the future it could have. I'm interested to see what you think, if there's actually a reason for it in game, Ray, because I'm not totally convinced there is right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. The history proves that if there's more utility, then there's more activity and there's more interest. Yeah. So if we're just going off the basis of that, all technically that needs to take place are implementations and releases of more syncs. If it's one by one in the span of, or the course of a year, you only get 3 more syncs. You have to let those actually flush out and be used and to see. And it's a trial and error period for syncs. Some syncs won't even work. Some people might not want to use their SLP to do anything for runes and crafting, and they'll just sell out continually as they have been. But then you won't reap the rewards of earning more SLP if you don't utilize the runes, maybe strengthen your axes. So it's it's the balancing act as a developing team to get the economy running again, and then also as a player to put in work, as they said, to earn more. It's a skill-based type of game, or this era of gaming is transitioning very fast to skill-based playing. So that's all it comes down to, where it's just you'll earn more from being a better skilled player, from paying attention and spending more time in the games, like we talked about earlier when Casper was here. Those esport gamers, you're gonna pick a game, stick to it, and that's your job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now that the price is kind of I wouldn't say stabilizes, but do you think it will eventually stabilize sub 10 cents, or do you think that it will ever again see an all-time high comparable to where it was, or was that just a spike while it was finding itself?
There's a few landmark occasions, if you think about it, and this is pure speculation on my part, but obviously they want to transition the project into full 3D. We want to see land be incorporated in the mini games and the projects like that. There's a possibility, but what they need to achieve that is a reason for people to buy it. And there are a few in the future. I think there's a few chances that could happen. I see a stable price for SLP. This could be controversially low, but I see it as being sustainable at around 5 or 6 cents. I think if you convert that, I think that's a good amount for the amount of time it takes to play. And I think it's stable and solid and realistic. Right. And there are plenty of people who have managed to really force themselves to go through, if they're playing purely for the money, at just over a cent, slightly less than 5 or 6 is a good stable number. I don't see why not. I mean, I think a lot of people would be happy. I'd be happy.
Yeah, when it comes to the amount of syncs, so I'm thinking over the course of time of the development and release of syncs and the different types of them, there's going to be a finite amount of syncs. There can't be an infinite amount unless from Axie Infinity itself. But the mini games.
What do you mean by sync? I'm lost on that
sync
word.
Sync is another way to burn SLP. So there's an over minting of SLP, and that was the biggest problem. And then now there's going to be syncs or burning mechanism implemented, so it removes more SLP as it's coming in, and that balance takes place. So now there's a less, or an increase, if you want to call it, as there's an unlimited supply of SLP. The team, again, as long as I've been in the project, always said it's a utility token for breeding purposes only. So, as the run up with Scholars came into be, everyone's attention was SLP. Binance puts it on. Everybody, it's the whole rave happened. But I'm thinking, outside of the mini games that are going to be those additional burning mechanisms for SLP, along with AXS, Sky Mavis as a game cannot just continually, if they want to, sure. But I'm thinking, in my opinion, they should have successful burning mechanisms at a certain amount. It's not going to be necessary for them to constantly create, unless the ones they do, as far as burning SLP, are successful ones. And so, because at what point does it end for creating the amount of sinks? Right? 2 years, 5 years from now, we're gonna have 30 different ways to burn SLP. Like, it doesn't make any sense. There's gonna have to be a finite amount that just keep everything in house in the game itself, and that are successful to equalize the burning and the minting of SLP. So that's just
it's a good explanation. Yeah.
Thanks. And yeah, that was pretty much it for AXS, Axes, SLP, and the whole nine.
Yeah. So yeah, with that, I don't know if we have any more news. In the past, we've covered Alluvium. We've talked a bit about DeFi Kingdoms. And yeah, I'm excited to see what Alluvium is going to do this year. I think that it's one of those projects that has had such a tremendous amount of support. I think it's due in part to their unusual approach to tokenomics. But they haven't really had that, and the way that they share the development cycles and process with their community. They seem to have done well there, but how long can you ride that before you actually have to say, look, now we're about to show something? And I know they have some things on the horizon. Yeah, I'm excited to see what they're going to do. Aside from that, you've heard to mention a couple times of Pegaxi. At some point, maybe in the next show or the show thereafter, I'd like to transparently show just what my venture into the space was, good, bad, or ugly. And that's not that I'm an expert by any means. It's just been what I've been learning forward and stumbling into and saying, oh, probably shouldn't have done that, but I did it anyway and figured it out as I go. And I think it's kind of helpful to share that. And so at some point, I think it would be good to share it here on the show. Anything else anyone wants to share? Or after the 3 hour mark, so I think we've gone plenty long. Any closing thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah, that's what comes to mind. Thank you for all the people watching and the ones after the fact, and appreciate all your time that you spend with us with these long form Sunday lives. Shout out to MMA. Thank you so much for coming on, being our guest. First and foremost.
Yeah. No, the pleasure's all ours. And again, I want to extend the same sentiment. Thank you to everyone that's joined us for the whole 3 hours live, everyone that's going to watch after the fact, and especially you guys for having us on. It's been a really fantastic opportunity to talk. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks a ton.
Any final thoughts, Banjo?
No, just another, really appreciate having MMA on. Love the perspective. I love going deep on the financial side. So it's exciting to get the dialogue out in the open, and I'm excited for what's to come.
Fancy, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, that was long.
Yes, it was long, and it was different. I think this is a different show than we've ever had, and we're really trying to think, because normally we spend a lot of time theory crafting, but this is an important part of creating a lifestyle and creating a career in this space. And there's some aspects to it that really need to be considered that probably are going to weigh heavily on experience in this space, and experience that personally I don't have. I'm new in the space of trying to make play to earn gaming as a business and as a guild. And so leaning on those that have had success, I think it helps me. And so as a result, I'm also hoping that it helps our listening community. And we appreciate you guys showing up, sharing your comments, your thoughts, and your feedback. And yeah, each and every week that you're here, we appreciate you being a part of the conversation. And with that, I think we're done. And we will see you again this time next week. And we're going to go with our recent outro, which is has the song Atlas Miner. With that, see you next week.
Atlas Miner, you were born to push the block in search of ore. Now it's time that you are gone, so farewell, Atlas Miner. And farewell, Mud and ONI too. Who's the sector same to you? The pirate bastards ran him through, so farewell, Atlas Miner. They promised you a diamond mine, but I'll be damned, it's hard to find. I hope there's justice for their crimes, and farewell, Atlas Miner. And farewell, friend, don't take it hard. Getting killed ain't all that bad. The treat you well in the repair yard. So farewell, Atlas Mine.